Doing pretty well. Hey Jeff, does this time? I know that we had talked a while back about the time issue. Is this going to work going forward, or do you think we should discuss this as a commission about like trying to find a different time that works for everyone?
I mean, I'm fine with this. I don't have any conflicts with this time, right now. So I'm fine with staying this way if this works for everybody else. I
Just
don't
want
I
to.
don't know when the last time like the whole group discussed it, if it would be something that would be good to discuss again. But if on my account, it's fine.
Okay, great. I seem to remember some kind of conflict on your end, and I just wanted to make sure that we knew that if so we could discuss it if it were an issue.
Yeah, that was just that one concert I had rehearsals for. So
How'd the concert go?
I went very well, thank you.
Lovely.
Zachariah, I'm not sure if you were copied or if I forwarded it to you, but Gail won't be attending tonight.
I saw that. Yeah, I think you must have forwarded it to me.
Perfect.
Thank you.
I'm going to go in and out of view because I'm just finishing up my dinner. So I hope that's okay, but I'll be attentive.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate you being here nonetheless.
Nobody wants to watch me eat.
Okay, I think we're good to get started. And if we have any latecomers, they can just join. Okay, so welcome everyone to the March 16th meeting of the Ann Arbor Renters Commission. I hope everyone's doing very well. Now, the purpose of the Renters Commission is to advise the City Council and the city administrator in matters affecting renters in the city of Ann Arbor. The Ann Arbor Renters Commission is made up of voting members who are appointed by the mayor and approved by City Council, 2 non-voting City Council liaisons, 1 non-voting liaison to HHSIB, that seat's currently empty, and 2 non-voting members representing different landlord perspectives, as well as 1 non-voting representative from the University of Michigan Student Legal Services. Now we have a couple sections where we'll offer public comments. So if you'd like to speak through the webinar link or by phone, the information to do that is, so for the phone, you have to call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 935-8080-1941. To be called on to speak and give your comment, callers must press *9 if they're listening by phone, or just raise your hand if you're doing it through the web link. And we have the shortened link, which is a2gov.org/Renters Commission meeting, where the first letter of each word is capitalized. And then you will be called upon by city staff one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by the username if you're calling in through Zoom. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. So please state your name at the beginning of your comment. And if you'd like, you can also state your address or your ward. City staff will indicate when callers have 30 seconds left of their 3-minute comment period. And after 3 minutes, you will be placed on mute so that we can go to the next speaker. Okay. So moving on to roll call. Because it's an electronic meeting, we have to still include the city and state we're attending from. So I will go through the roll. I am here, Commissioner Chen.
Yes, I'm here. I'm calling from Hangzhou, China. I'm visiting. I'll be back in a few days. So, yeah. So I thank you.
I can't believe you're calling into this. That shows real commitment. Thank you, Dan Dan. That's incredible. I hope you're having a great visit in China, in Hangzhou.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, Commissioner Peterson.
Hi everyone, I'm calling in from Ann Arbor.
And welcome, Lucy. And I forgot to say, I'm also calling in from Ann Arbor. Commissioner Kelly.
I am here in Ann Arbor.
Welcome. Commissioner Cohen-Smith.
Here, calling in from Ann Arbor.
Welcome. Commissioner Rumel.
Here and calling in from the bucolic township of Ann Arbor Township.
Lovely. Commissioner Droppelman.
I'm here and calling from Ann Arbor.
Welcome. Commissioner Else.
Hi guys, I'm here from Ann Arbor. My children sound like animals, so I have my sound filter on. Hopefully we don't hear it, but hi.
I haven't heard anything so far. That's all right. Commissioner Lowe's.
Here, I'm calling in from Ward 3 of Ann Arbor, excuse me, Ward 4.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Tibbetts.
I am here also in Ann Arbor.
Welcome. Commissioner Rosen, who is not here, our liaison to SLS. Councilmember Redina.
Here and back in Ann Arbor as of a couple of hours ago.
Welcome back. Don't know where you were, but Councilmember Harrison.
I'm here and I'm in Ann Arbor.
Welcome. And now we had one resignation since our last meeting, which was Commissioner McCurgy. I'm very sad to see her go. She was a really hard-working member of the commission and just a really nice neighbor. So anyway, I hope she's able to stay engaged somehow going forward, if possible. Okay. Now, also our staff member. Sorry, Kristen.
Thank you.
Yes. And our city attorney, one of our city attorney, John
Hello,
Reiser.
folks.
Yeah. Welcome. And that brings us to, I think I got everyone. I just want to double check before we move on. Yeah. Now we can move on to item number 3, which is the approval of our agenda. So I have a question for Kristen before we proceed. I know I had contacted you, Kristen, about amending the agenda since we had a request to add a resolution. Another one that I think the commission hasn't seen yet. Do we approve the agenda first and then motion to amend it? I always forget.
We'll move and second to approve the agenda, and then we'll move and second to do an amendment, and then you'll vote on the amendment, and then at the end you'll vote on the amended agenda. Is there a different amendment than you had emailed about with the carbon monoxide, or is that the one?
That's the one.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes. So is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Motion by Jeff. Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Lucy. So I will motion to amend the agenda to add on a resolution that is endorsing a version of the carbon monoxide detector requirement proposed by Councilmember Cornell, who presented at our last meeting. Do we have a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, I think I heard Nick first. Great. So all those in favor of amending the agenda to include that resolution, say aye.
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 Okay.
All those opposed, say nay. Okay, with that, the resolution is included in our agenda, and the agenda is amended. I will present that, and we can go through the language. It's before we start discussing it. Okay, so now we have to approve the amended agenda. So all those in favor of approving the amended agenda, say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Okay, with that, the amended agenda is adopted. Kristen, did I do that right?
Really good job. One thing I would like to clarify where on the agenda you'd like to have this item. You want to have it, yes, we have several business items tonight. Maybe with the other resolution. So they're kind of like the two action items are together in case anyone's calling in to speak. They don't have to wait till the end.
So that would be we would add this on 6-C and D, excuse me, D after that one, and then push D and E to E and F, right?
Yeah, so add it after the sorry, I'm pulling up my agenda. Yes, right after 8C, then at the natural gas. Not 6, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I mess that up?
So let's put it on the agenda between the resolution in support of the ordinance to ban natural gas and the discussion.
Perfect.
With the apartment wait list. So it'll be the new 60, the rest will move down.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Okay. I'll try to remember that when we get to that part of the agenda. Great. All right. Just go back to the agenda now. So now we need to approve our previous meetings minutes. So we have the minutes from our February 16th meeting, 2023. Is there a motion to approve the previous meetings minutes?
Motion.
Thank you, Hannah. Motion by Hannah. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jeff. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Okay, with that, the previous meetings minutes are approved. And then that brings us to our first general public comment. Item number 5. Kristen, would you like to lead that?
Sure.
Thanks.
Public comment can be made by phone at 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099, and then entering meeting ID 935-8080-1941, or using the web link, and that is a2gov.org/renters commission meeting. Anyone who has called should press *9 to raise their hand, and anyone who is attending in the Zoom meeting should use the raise hand feature. We'll call on folks one by one, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. So we have a couple of hands raised. If you would like to address the Renters Commission for up to 3 minutes, go ahead and raise your hand if you haven't already. All right, we'll start with Zoom user B. Parnell McCarter. You have 3 minutes to address the Renters Commission.
Hello, my name is Parnell. I'm in Scioto Township, but I am currently a tenant, and I also have been a tenant in the city of Ann Arbor itself for a good number of years. I want to speak about the gas ban proposal, and specifically in favor of it. I want to speak from my experience as a tenant and also as someone with asthma. Because of my experience with asthma, I am especially passionate about air quality issues, both outdoor air quality and indoor air quality. Indoor air quality can sometimes be neglected. It's not necessarily what comes to mind when we think about air pollution, but it actually is very important because it's where we spend most of our time. And oftentimes indoor air quality can actually be worse than outdoor air quality. One of the culprits of that is gas appliances, especially gas stoves. You may have heard about that in the news recently, since there is a growing awareness about that. Yes, and so I think it would be a very positive step for the city of Ann Arbor in new construction. Obviously, there's old construction and plenty of it in Ann Arbor, but for new construction where we have the opportunity to write a new chapter for the city, it would be a very positive development to protect future residents of Ann Arbor and their kids from the air emissions that come with gas stoves and other gas appliances. Obviously, there are certain benefits also in terms of the climate, in terms of not being part of the issues with fracking and the health harms that that causes as well. But even locally here in Ann Arbor, there are benefits that can be found in terms of improving people's health, reducing healthcare costs, and in some cases, even reducing utility bills, since things like heat pumps tend to be a lot more efficient in some cases than gas furnaces. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, callers can address the Renters Commission about any item at this time, but there will also be another opportunity to address the Renters Commission for up to 3 minutes about either of the action items on the agenda, the resolution to support the ban of natural gas or the resolution in support of the carbon monoxide amendments. All right. Next, we have Zoom user Hannah Marie Elliott. You'll have up to 3 minutes to address the Renters Commission.
Hello, my name is Hannah. I'm a student at the University of Michigan. I currently rent an apartment in the 4th Ward. And something I've been kind of interested in would be kind of implementing the inclusion of utility costs in leases to allow students to make more sustainable based decisions, but then also just kind of be more aware of their like holistic renter costs. And hopefully that would also kind of encourage landlords to make more sustainable decisions with like the technology and sort of utilities they use in hopes of lowering costs. Something I was also interested in would be like the implementation of some sort of sustainability scale for renting options on Ann Arbor. Just so like students can kind of be more aware. It could totally be done like also in like coordination with like UMish's off-campus housing division. And then just in general, I'd be curious to like, I'd be interested in seeing more kind of like incentives, whether that be monetary or other motivations for landlords to meet kind of local and then also sustainability standards. But yeah, just as a student, I think it's important to have like sort of affordable, safe, and sustainable housing. I've been really happy with what Ann Arbor is doing so far, but would just love to see more also. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Kristen, do you mind if I just give some information to the commission and the spectators, including our last commentator? I was contacted by Councilmember Cornell to add the resolution to the agenda, but also she mentioned that she was working on that very particular issue. So to our last commenter, you may want to get in touch with Councilmember Cornell about that. And also you can email us if you want to bring some commissioners on board to working on that issue, because I think that's great points. Thanks.
All right, we have another hand raised caller with the phone number ending in 134. Have 3 minutes to address the Renters Commission.
Thank you, Kristen and Chair Farah. I'm Ken Garber. I rent at 28 Haverhill Hill Court. On the gas ban resolution again. Ann Arbor's direct greenhouse gas emissions are rising fast due to new construction. 30 separate gas burning developments now underway or in advanced planning will put almost 24,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent emissions into the atmosphere each year for decades to come, dwarfing the benefits from the city's 3 ongoing and planned solar projects. Just last week, City Council approved 320 new gas-burning apartments off Pontiac Trail. City planners recommend approval next week for 78 gas-burning townhomes on Platte Road. It's constant, but few are paying attention. Reduced commuter emissions will offset only a fraction of the damage. The 820 plan counted on the state to enable cities to require most new buildings to be net zero energy, but that didn't happen. So we need this gas ban. Dr. Missy Stultz in the city's Office of Sustainability and Innovations writes that, quote, this proposed change is in full alignment with the city's 820 carbon neutrality plan, end quote. You already heard from Parnell McCarter about the health impacts of gas stoves. Utility cost concerns are overblown. A high efficiency air source heat pump is 4 times more efficient than a modern gas furnace. High electric rates and low gas prices might make electric heat more expensive. Not certain, because the studies out there assume low gas prices, which are no longer true. And there are 2 mitigating factors. First, heat pumps double as air conditioners, and they're much more efficient than standard units. Because heat pumps run refrigerant to individual rooms where heat exchange takes place, they don't have to push cold air through ducts, which is inefficient. So cheaper heat pump air conditioning offsets any increase in winter heating bills. And second, the state should soon pass the 2021 IECC Energy Code, which will make all new buildings much tighter. Minimum attic insulation of R60 up from the current R38, and for the first time, an insulating shell around the building, not just between the studs. This will hugely lower utility bills. Some say a gas ban will drive development out of the city and that it will raise taxes. There's no evidence for this in the 50+ cities with gas ban ordinances to date. Such fear tactics are the same ones the Landlord Association threw against us in 1988 when we tried to pass rent control here. I was treasurer of that rent control campaign, and the Landlord Association buried us with this kind of stuff.
30 more seconds.
I'm getting PTSD just from hearing it again. This was one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. So here we are in 2023. Please pass this resolution. We cannot keep locking in new fossil fuel emissions for decades to come.
Thank you. All right, if there are any other attendees who would like to address the Renters Commission, can go ahead and raise your hand now. All right, no other attendees have indicated you can close public comment.
Thank you, Kristen. That moves us into business, item 6. We can start with 6-A, the presentation from rental housing services.
They are on their way in. Perfect.
Great, thank you.
All right. Let's see. You all have the ability to share your screen if needed. All right, so tonight from Rental Housing, we have joining us the Community Services Area Administrator, Derek Delacourt. And then we also have Leisha Turner-Tolbert, and Leisha is the Building and Rental Services Manager. And then joining us, we also have Chris McFarland, and Chris is a code compliance official and the manager of rental housing services. So we'll kind of leave it to you all how you want to format this.
I will start, I guess. The majority of this, Leisha is going to handle for us, obviously being the manager of building and rental. I'd just like to say hello. Kristen obviously already indicated I'm the community services administrator. Community Services manages all the planning and zoning, building and rental. We do parks and recreation. We also partner quite extensively with the Washtenaw County Office of Economic Development on safety net services and coordinated funding, formally coordinated funding. We also do an extensive amount of work with the Ann Arbor Housing Commission as well as part of our service area. So a lot of what we do is paramount to the first touch a lot of folks have with the city, whether it's a park, whether it's through building or an addition on their home, whether it's through a new development. So we spend a lot of time with folks who may be having first contact with the city, and that certainly includes those who are renters in the community, whether they be students or non-students. Our primary focus is and always has been the inspection and registration of the structures and the properties. That's where the majority of the housing ordinance lies, and our process is focused on. Leisha has been involved with that for a number of years, much longer than I've been here, and for the last, I think, almost 6 years now, Leisha has been the manager of the building and rental department and overseeing it. Chris recently has moved up through the department and has taken over the rental responsibilities of managing the day-to-day operations of the inspectors and what goes on in that part. So I'm grateful to be here. I'll be here to answer any questions. We appreciate the opportunity, and with that, I'll turn it over to Leisha. I know there was some questions, and I think she's prepared to walk through some of that. And then obviously all three of us can be here to answer any questions you may have. So thank you.
So we did not prepare a slide or anything or a presentation. What we did do is we had a series of questions that was forwarded to us by Kristen. What we would like to do is keep this meeting very fluid, and we'd like to answer any questions that you all may have of us. Chris will be very active in answering a lot of the questions. He is doing the day-to-day inspection. He has a team of 6 inspectors currently that are doing the inspections. I ran the program for a very long time upon starting with the city of Ann Arbor, and I've been with the city now almost 14 years. So I've been around. I know a lot of history about the program from its from the old inspectors leaving to new inspectors coming on board, about the admin staff and things like that. So I can certainly answer any historic questions, but we are certainly here to answer any of the questions that was on the sheet that we were forwarded. And like I said, we just like to keep the meeting very fluid. A lot of the questions that was on the information sheet that we had was very much around inspection process, the complaint process, and basically how does one get in contact with the rental housing office, and how the complaint process is conducted. So we could start there with how do you get in contact with the rental housing office, and how the complaint process starts, and how does one actually get results from a complaint. Or we can put the document up. So it's totally up to you guys how you want to do that. So would you prefer to go through the document itself, or would you just rather have questions that you guys have on top of your head you want to ask us?
Chris, I think it might be helpful to start if Chris, you could walk through what an inspection process looks like, kind of from beginning to end, how often we do them on a unit, what that process looks like in a general inspection, and then secondarily maybe walk them through afterwards, how you receive a complaint, how you process a complaint, and then how you respond to a complaint. Use maybe just a generic situation. And then those two things, I think after those, we can open it up to questions. I think from my understanding, Leisha, I think you're exactly right. That's where the bulk of the interest was. So Chris, if you're prepared to do that, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. So it all starts with a registration, which I believe is section 8517 of our code. And the registration doubles as an application for a certificate of compliance. Once we receive that registration, we do a review and we schedule an initial inspection for that property. Generally, that inspection is going to be sometime 21 to 35 days from when we receive that registration. So use an example, I'll use a single family home because that's most simple. Inspection starts in the car as you're parking. Inspectors are looking at the exterior of the home. We go to the door, we greet whoever's there to provide us access. Before the inspection, there's always going to be some property review. We're going to look at history of the property. If it's an existing rental, we'll look at the permit record, see what work was done, see if there's any loose ends. And once we're at the site, go to the door, greet whoever's going to provide us access. We generally start in the basement. That's where typically we find the most hazards. That's where the mechanicals are. So we start down there. We walk the basement. We kind of adopt a policy of always turning left, working clockwise, helps us with consistency. So walk down the stairs, turn left into every room, doing a first full circle through the room, going through our checklist that we have on our iPads. Once we're done with the basement, we're going to go up to the first floor, same thing. Every door we come out of, we're going to turn left. We're going to hit every room. We're going to do a loop in every single one. Checking plugs, testing smoke detectors, checking any life safety devices that are on site, actually physically testing them for the most part. Then we're going to go up to the second level, which is typically going to be your bedrooms. So same thing, we go up there, we turn left, we do our loops, we check function of windows, again, smoke detectors, making sure plumbing fixtures are operating properly. Things of that nature. Lastly, we're going to walk the exterior of the home, where we're going to look for issues such as peeling paint, weatherization, things of that nature. After the inspection is going to come an inspection report, which in a perfect world is going to be a past inspection. If that's not the case, then we issue a notice of violation. Generally, those go out the day of the inspection, sometimes the following day. Notice of violation, we're required to give the property owner or agent a reasonable time to make corrections. That reasonable time is not to exceed 60 days per our ordinance. There is some additional language regarding extensions for work that requires major alterations subject to building permits or exterior work that can't be completed depending on weather. Then we're going to follow up with a re-inspection to verify those corrections have been made. Generally, that inspection is scheduled at that deadline we've given for compliance, which can range from anywhere from 15 days to 60 days. Sometimes we'll have something that's an immediate life safety. We may try to follow up within 72 hours to verify that's corrected. So we come back, we do our re-inspection. We'll assume assuming everything's okay at that point, we are going to issue what's called a certificate of compliance. Certificate of compliance are good for 2.5 years with a first time pass incentive for an additional year, which could result in 3.5 years. The inspection requirement goes hand in hand with certificate of compliance is, and prior to the expiration of that certificate of compliance, they should be reapplying for a new certificate, and then we would start that process all over again. Once it's in the system, or even times when it's unregistered, we may have a complaint come in of some condition that's on site. So we have instruction on our website and staff who handles complaints. We have a complaint form that we provide. Once that complaint form comes into the staff who handles those, she enters them into our back office system, where they then come to me. They get assigned to an inspector. We're then required to perform an investigation of those conditions within 10 days. That process is handled similar to an initial inspection, where we will do the inspection. If we determine a violation is present, then we'll issue a notice of violation. Generally, complaint-based violations are handled on an expedited basis. So instead of 60 days, we might give them 2 weeks, depending on the nature and what it takes to repair. Any questions?
I want to add in on that just for
context, and I apologize if this is redundant for some of the folks on the committee. I know you've been diligently working to learn the system and what we have. Alicia, I think we have 30,000 units in the city, something like that, that we try to inspect. We have 6 rental inspectors on staff right now. I think that produces anywhere, we're lucky if we keep that fully staffed for a full 365 days. It's hard to keep all 6 inspectors going. I think we average between about 5,500 inspection slots a year, 5,500 and 6,000, somewhere like that when we're up and running. So when you compare that to the 30,000 units a year, you see it is not easy to get in all the units as often as we like. To do that, one of the things we work extraordinarily hard on is to have a common understanding between the landlord and the inspector as to what's to be expected at the inspections. If they are aware of what we're looking for and we are clear and solid in our communication, our hope is the more of these we can get to pass on first inspection, the more units we see. Our primary goal is the physical safety or the safety of the structure for the tenants who live in it. And that safety standard is set through code. We try to be clear about what's expected or what's required to be looked at as part of the code, and then be clear in that information. Our goal is that the landlords are understand what it is expected and required, and that it's ready to be inspected when we get there. Every time we have to go back out for a second inspection, it's a missed opportunity to do a new first, which is really based on those numbers. You can see why would that be such a priority for us. The more we can get into, that is why we grant the extra year on the first. If you pass on the first, we try to make it a significant reward so that we can get into more units, which is our goal. Ann Arbor is unusual in its ordinance that even in its multifamily, it's multi-story, multi-unit, multi-story buildings. We inspect 100% of the units. Most cities, about the most cities do on a building like that is about 20% of the units when they go out and do inspections, for exactly the reasons we just talked about, just the sheer numbers versus the number of inspectors that are feasible to keep moving. So it's a little bit of the context. It might be more than what you asked, but I think it helps set what we're trying to do. We are trying to get into as many of those structures they can to make sure they meet that ordinance defined safety standard. And that there is a common understanding between us and the landlord as to what's expected. So we don't have to chase them around. If we're constantly showing up and requiring or asking new and undefined things, they have a tendency to run and hide from us. Our goal is to create a relationship where if they know what to expect, they know what's coming, we give them plenty of opportunity and plenty of education ahead of time. We're hoping they want us in and we get in and out as quickly as possible, all in hopes of getting into as many units as we can with those 5,500 or 6,000 slots. So I see a bunch of hands up. I'll shut up. I don't know who calls on folks, but like I said, we are happy to answer questions. It's what we're best at. So.
And if I could, just before, I do want to touch on some of the questions and give a little bit of context here also. Some of the questions was, is this information available? So first of all, the chapter that we actually inspect to is chapter 105, and that is a City of Ann Arbor housing code. So most cities inspect to a International Property Maintenance Code. We have not adopted that as of right now for the city. We have our own city code, and that code was actually developed with a team of volunteers and the building official back in the 60s. And it's only been revised one time, and that was back in the 80s. So we are still using that code. That code is also, you can find that in the Muni code system online. And we have made some slight adjustments to it. Kristen Larkham, before she left, took some things out of it And we've struck some things out, but it's still pretty much intact from the original code. Also, reports, any kind of inspection reports, any permits that are attached to rental properties, any permitting system, all of our permitting retention system is online. So all of our information is online, either through our old system, which was eTrackIt, or through our new permitting system, which is Stream. So any information you want to find, and we promote this with with the public to go out and look for certificates online. Look for certifications when you are shopping for rentals. If you're looking for a rental house, we used to have a partnership with U of M. With Before Move-In, we used to go out and speak to students, and we used to promote to go out and make sure that your properties are certified rentals. And the way to do that is to go online and put in your address and see if it has what we call a CR record. And if it has a CR record, look to see if it is current. All that information is online. One of the questions was, if it's not current, what do? You can contact the rental housing office, and you can ask, has this property ever been registered? If you don't see a CR record, that's an indication that it's not registered, because if it's registered and it has a CR record, you can see the status, be it current and it'll say certified, or be it expired, or it's either in process. So those are the statuses that you would see online. So those are some of the questions that was actually in that document. So I would just wanted to touch on that a little bit about the process. And as far as we also have a pre-inspection checklist that's online. That's part of our resources on our rental housing page. So you can go on there and look at that pre-inspection checklist. However, we don't encourage people when you move in to actually go through and use that as like a move-in checklist. We want you to let us do that. We are asking you to go out and make sure that you have a certificate or that the property is certified as a rental. We don't want you to put on a rental housing inspector hat. We want you to let us do that. That's our job. So, but the checklist is out there so that you can see what kind of, and it's only a caption of what we would be looking for. It's not encompass, it's only a caption of what we're looking for. You can't put an entire code into a checklist. You can only put like maybe the more common violations that we find into a checklist. So it's not inclusive of everything. So those are some of the questions that was on the list. So as we go, we may hit a couple of more of them, but I just wanted to kind of put that out there. So like Derek said, I don't know who selects the hand raising, but we're open now for questions.
I'd be happy to moderate and call on people if that makes things easier.
That'd be fine.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the initial presentation there and walking us through what an inspection is like. That's very, very helpful, and we're extremely excited and grateful to have you here tonight. All of you. I was expecting one person. That's fantastic. So thank you for taking the time. So we'll go through the questions, and we'll start with Nick.
Okay, thank you. I agree. Thank you for an excellent presentation. I learned a lot, even though I have some knowledge of this area. I have two questions. One, I think it was Chris who raised the issue that the housing code is mostly unchanged from the 80s. It's my understanding that there's a model building code or a model housing inspection code. To what extent do we track that, or to what extent does City Council amend the code on its own, or combination of both?
Yeah, so I'll start with the first part of that question. Here in Michigan, we use what's called a model building code. That model code is what we refer to as the I codes. It consists of the International Building Code, the International Residential Code, International Plumbing Code, so on and so forth. The state of Michigan takes those books and amends them as they see fit, and those get adopted statewide. The International Code Council also publishes what's called the International Property Maintenance Code. And as Derek said earlier, we have not adopted that code. There are a lot of similarities with our housing code, but there are some differences as well. So that's not something we've adopted locally here. It's the housing code. And if you look through our code, you'll see the footnotes. It tells you every ordinance that resulted in a change in that code. And you'll see some sections may have been modified every 3 years. You'll find some sections haven't been touched since 1988.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. The second question I have is, when you give a violation, to what extent do you work with the city attorneys to help determine how that's going to be ultimately handled? Or do you, when you hand it off to the city attorneys, are you dropping out of the process at that point?
So it really depends on the situation. Our code does require for us to, give them the opportunity to make those code corrections. So if we see something might become challenging or difficult, we might get some counsel from legal in the meantime. But a lot of the times, they don't really get involved until we determine a ticket needs to be written to get compliance. And we stay involved throughout that process. We're in court, we're in breakout rooms, we're part of those negotiations.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much.
And we try to stay out of the attorney's office as much as we can. If we cut them out of the process altogether, we would, but they get very, very angry with us when we show up in court without them.
I wish I could stay out of the. I wish I could stay out of the attorney's office.
No,
Riser's
Yeah,
pleasant.
you
You want to hang out with Riser. He's a lot of fun.
I will tell you too on that, and from a standpoint, in addition to what we do specifically, the International Property Maintenance Code, I would love for that to be our guidebook, because it is an independent code. And it is updated constantly by the ICC. It stays in conformance with other communities, keeps us consistent with other communities. And Arbor has had a history of going on its own for years. And it's funny because anytime we have brought up the IPM, the International Property Maintenance Code, there's this look of abject horror from both sides of the issue, whether it's tenants and locally and elected officials and the landlords, because both of them are sure that by adopting it, somehow they are going to come up on the short end of that new code. At some point, we hope to, and have worked in the past and continue to work towards, we would love to bring that to council as at least the component we utilize to do our inspections. There is a lot in our housing code now, as you are aware, and a big part of the reason you're here, that deals with non-inspection issues, non-physical structure issues, that talk more about leasing and contractual issues and things like that, where the city of Ann Arbor plays a very proactive role differently than other communities. At some point, it's my hope that we will have a set of codes that deal with that specifically, and are consolidated and talk about those. And then the IPMC, which is what we would use to do the inspection process, the physical structure process. It's not necessary. I think the process would simplify some of these things, but it is also scary for a lot of people because they have grown so used to the housing code and how it works, and are fearful that their knowledge and understanding of how to use it, work it, apply it, will be lost. So it's something we hope to maybe come to talk to you guys about in the future. So I didn't want to take an opportunity or miss an opportunity to bring that up while we're here. Sorry, I'll interject every now and then. It's what I do.
No, thank you, Derek. That actually addresses one of what was going to be my question. So it's good to know that. I think we're probably going to start looking into the International Property Management Code and see what this commission feels about it.
Well, and if you do that, that is something either Chris or someone from our staff, I'm pretty sure, and I'm going to speak for Alicia here, we could have Chris or someone come and walk you through what that code looks like, how it works compared to what we do. I think that would be a helpful conversation, and I think it's one we would be I'm going to say it's one we would love to participate in with you guys when you're ready to take a look at it.
I'm going to add on to that too, since it's relevant to this meeting. The 2018 version of the International Property Maintenance Code began requiring carbon monoxide alarms in existing buildings.
Yeah, that's probably where it came from. And Chris, I mean, I would ask that maybe take a look at it, and if we can provide copies to the commission with, or
They're
links.
free to the public.
Yeah,
all ICC books are all free without a login account. So that's one nice thing.
Maybe we'll follow up with that, and we'll trust Kristen in the chair to let us know if that's a conversation you guys want to have in the future.
Great, thank you very much. I think we would like to have that conversation. So I have a few questions here. First of all, you mentioned, Chris, the complaint-based inspections and how you prioritize those. And I've spoken to a number of tenants who want to make complaints, but are concerned that if they make a complaint, that the inspection will give away who made it and will negatively impact their ability to renew their lease or to get a good price, et cetera. They're afraid of retaliation, in other words. So what is your process specifically for complaint-based inspections? And do you try to keep it on, discreet until you've found that there was a violation? No,
we're required to notify the property owner of the complaint. So we do that prior to the inspection takes place. We're certainly not going to suggest who the complaint came from. A good handful of complaints do get FOIA'd, so I assume that information's available to property owners. But it's a common thing that I've heard as well about the fear of retaliation.
Yeah, we hear that on a regular basis, not just in rental, but other things. We do not advertise who the complaint came from. We will share what the complaint is. I believe, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, our staff is taught to direct them to FOIA that, which is then reviewed by the attorney's office. If they are legally required to disclose it as part of FOIA, then we have to. It's not something we offer up in the field or answer that question. If we did, it was something. If our inspectors are, it would be something we'd like to know about. But generally, when we show up on a complaint basis, landlords jump to the assumption, even if they don't FOIA, that it came from the tenant. I can tell you that from experience based. The landlords who call us will immediately assume that it was the tenant, and they will say, well, that person, and then they will launch into an explanation as to why the tenant shouldn't be listening. So we get that a lot. Sometimes it goes smoothly. But we teach our staff not to give that up or to talk about that unless it is FOIA. It works better for our inspectors. It keeps them out of that loop, brings the attorney's office in if there's a problem. And then we make sure that only information that's disclosable through FOIA is what's made available.
And that information is not available online. So complaints are, even though you can get the complaint form online, that information is not available online. So they would have to FOIA that information. And we do send that information to the clerk's office. They send it to the attorney's office and they redact information. But again, depending on how specific the complaint is and the situation, especially if there's been already communication between the tenant and the landlord, it's very limited what we can do to keep the landlord from knowing exactly who made the complaint, but they do not get it directly from us.
That's good to know. Thank you. And a follow up on that, do you have an estimate of how many FOIA requests? I know this is probably a question for John or another city attorney. I'm not sure, but do we know how many FOIA requests are made for information regarding complaint-based, complaints, housing complaints?
I wouldn't know, Zachariah. I'd have to check with Matt Thomas, or I'd have to check with Jackie down there. Just FOIA requests with respect to landlord-tenant complaints.
Well, what I can do is, Lisa, those would probably come to you or Chris to get that answer. Do we get a bunch of them or no?
We have not gotten a ton of them. I would, if I had to guess off the top of my head, we may get 20, 25 a year. Okay. We don't get a ton. of complaint-based for rental housing.
I mean, how many FOIAs do you get to disclose how many FOIAs have you seen come across your desk to disclose the complaint?
Out of that, we might get 10. We don't get a whole lot of FOIAs for complaints. Typically, and that's the other, typically we will work with the landlords and say, you know, you pretty much, they know if they're wrong, and we'll work with them and say if it's a complaint, it's a complaint. If it's wrong and there's a violation, we walk them through it. And we got a pretty good compliance rate with them complying with us after they get a phone call. So we don't get a whole lot of them wanting to know who turned them in. They pretty much know when they get the phone call from us what's going on. So we don't get a whole lot of FOIAs. They pretty much know.
And we do a good job. Alicia and her staff do a good job trying to talk landlords off the ledge, letting them know, hey, look, complaint or not, this is something we were going to find at the next one.
Yeah.
You know, retaliation, retribution against tenants and stuff like that. That's only going to make things more difficult with you going forward. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen. You know, like most things, most of the folks we deal with want to be in compliance. We tend to be and work with them better. Our goal is compliance, not enforcement, across the board, whether that's in the building or the rental field. Enforcement takes a ton of time and energy in comparison to the results. We want people to comply. And we try to work with them and let them know that compliance is always going to go a lot farther. It doesn't mean we don't get the complaints. It doesn't mean we don't have the bad landlords. It doesn't mean we don't have folks who take issue with Lisa and her staff, but they do a pretty nuanced job when we get these things of trying to make sure people understand, hey, we got the complaint, let's just fix it and we'll be on our way. And a lot of times we'll do an inspection or renew a CFC or do other things that work in the landlord's advantages while we're there to extend it to try to make that a more palatable situation, if that makes sense. Alicia, always jump in and correct me when I'm wrong too, please.
Yeah, we don't get a lot. We work very hard to just get them into compliance. We don't get a whole lot of people to FOIA.
Thank you. That's helpful. And one last quick question. You mentioned a number around 6,000 inspections per year.
Yes.
Is that 6,000? One more time.
So that's 6,000 about slots that if we're fully staffed, that we can have. Now, weather gets in the way of those, days off when we're short staffed, that happens. So rarely do we get to that full, but when at full capacity, filling all of our slots, we have about 6,000 a year, right? Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. And we'll move on to Jamie.
Yeah, thank you. So there was mention of an immediate safety concern, and I'm thinking more so in like the regular inspection process, not if a tenant has made a complaint. If an immediate safety concern is found, and this might fall more on the landlord, but I'm just wondering if there's any obligation to notify the tenant if there's an immediate safety concern, or if you're aware of it, might not fall within the scope of the housing code, but.
No, I mean, a lot of times they're going to be present, but if they're not, if we're coming back in 3 days, there wouldn't tend to be.
But if there's an immediate, there's also the dangerous building code that applies to all structures, whether you rent them out or not. So things can be posted, which puts the tenant on notice that something's amiss.
Yeah, that would be an even escalated situation.
Yeah, and then I'm going to jump in and say safety is a difficult word in what we do, because it is not it's not, we deal with this, is it meet the code or does it not? Everything in the code, there isn't a list of higher safety or lower safety things in the code. That being said, we have a trained staff that if there is a danger to someone in that structure, we do things. It may not be as quick legally as everybody would like, but they are immediately in contact with Leisha, with Chris, with John to do something to make sure that anybody who is unsafe, and again, I'm using it, but like John said, dangerous. There's definitions in the building code and the rental code as to define dangerous buildings and other things that cross the line. But really making arbitrary decision on what's safe and what isn't is difficult. It either meets the code compliance or doesn't. I'm struggling with my words a little bit to explain that, but safe is a word that gets thrown around a lot. And it is one that is difficult to define, and that individuals have different opinions on what is safe and what isn't safe. So we work very hard to try to make sure that all of the situations, anything that would require someone or would be that a tenant should know about, that we find a way to transfer that information to a tenant. But there is no, Chris is right, there's no legal obligation. We are dealing with the owner of the property. They are the ones who get the certificate. We are inspecting the structure. They are the ones obligated to meet the requirements of the code. So it's difficult at times.
Sorry about that. Go ahead, Jordan. Thank you for the answers.
Hi, guys. I am one of the 2 landlord members here. So I first wanted to start with super positive feedback. The last few inspections we've had, the inspectors have been awesome. Feel like we're getting to a super consistent point and we're getting things scheduled quickly. So we're just really happy about that. So thanks for all of your hard work there. It's obvious to us as landlords that a lot of effort has been put into that. So we're really grateful. A couple of things, I guess, that I am wondering regarding communication. Like, I guess I don't understand looking at it from a renter's safety perspective, and my role here is on the renters commission, even though I'm acting as a landlord representative. Like, is it just that we don't have enough bodies? Like, why aren't landlords notified? Because I have to track you down to schedule it. And so to me, if I'm a bad landlord and I'm not doing it, my tenants are more at risk. So like, why can't we work on that part of communication? Like, what are the barriers so that landlords could know when they're expiring, and those kind of things? Or like if something changes, if code changes, like thinking about this carbon monoxide detector thing, thinking about the early leasing ordinance, like how can we help you get resources so that landlords could get notified for those kind of really renters, tenants' rights, important things?
So I'll touch on the first part of that. Something which is new that we haven't had before that comes with our new software stream is reminder emails. So we have that system configured that it will allow you to renew a certificate up to 6 months before it expires. You're going to get an email letting you know that that's possible. And then we send a couple follow-up emails along the way as well at 90 days, 30 days, and at expiration. So that's going to be huge because there have been a lot of honest people just didn't know. Property managers that have 90 properties, that it's hard to manage. That's no excuse, but it's out there. So these automatic communications are going to be a big impact. As far as communicating new ordinances, I'm going to let Leisha take that one because that's something that she tends to handle more.
So, and I'm so glad you brought that up about the communication, because that is something that we have been working on for years, but it is written also into our code and it was written this way because it's more of you all than it is of us. So while I would love to have a staff of 50, we just don't have the staff to communicate to folks and have you all, and have everybody tell everybody, hey, you're expiring, you're expiring. So this new software will do that. We're also going to try, this is all new software, but we are going to try to send out communications as well about ordinances changes and things like that are coming also. The only other vehicle that we had was to update the pre-inspection checklist. and send that out and say, look at the highlighted areas, and these are the things that are changing. But we're moving to a paperless world, digital world. So we don't have that now. So with the new email communications that are going to be coming out, we're going to try to also append to that maybe some email notices that says, hey, did you know that we had a new ordinance or a code change and stuff like that. So I have mentioned that to our IT department to just see if we can get some kind of emails also to send out when we have updates. We've had them so few and far in between, but now that we are talking about making small adjustments to our code, maybe we'll have some other stuff that might come down the pipe. So this will be our first. This will be a trial. So I'm kind of working with her to see if we can actually get some of those things out to you guys. The other option would be to put it on it's a Gov Delivery for everybody that's on Gov Delivery that subscribes to any of the rental housing updates. We put it out there when we actually released our new software. And so we're going to see if we can get it on there. And it'll probably be on our rental housing page as well as an update as well. So those are kind of going to be some of our tools that we'll use.
Yay,
So,
I'm so glad to hear that. That's really great.
I'll add on to that as well. Since you asked the question about carbon monoxide, a new ordinance such as that, something we would do if it passed would be we send out an email, an inspection notice email, and it includes some information on what's expected and next steps. We would include an update in that email as well, so it's known. It's known up front in your initial inspection notice.
Yeah, we made the great decision to swap over our entire permitting and inspection software, not just for rental, but for building.
Yeah, I know, for
Site
everything.
plan review across the city. This does all of our site plan review, all of our engineering in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
Which turned to what should have been an 18-month process into a 2.5-year process. And it has really slowed our implementation of it. But it is designed to be more proactive.
Okay, that's great to hear. I will say that it's been really hard for me to search. Is that going to improve? Like I'm having a really hard time finding certificates of occupancy, and so I guess for me, user wise, like it's really challenging to find and to direct parents and students that I work with to find the certificates of occupancy in Stream. So I guess I'm wondering if there's maybe like a search video, if there could be like a 2-minute, here's how you search for these kind of things, like something that we could get out to our renters, to our student networks. Those kind of things might be helpful. So just kind of a tidbit on that it's seeming a lot less user friendly for searching. So I don't know if it's just us.
That makes perfect sense. One of the big things, one of the huge decisions we had to make was whether to take all the, I'm sure anybody who's dealt with the software, the biggest decision, are you going to take all the old data,
all the old stuff,
put it into it? And our old data was so
a lot. Yeah, no, I get it.
Difficult. It wasn't just a tough volume of it. It was very difficult. So it's not, so we do need to make sure that we are working on making sure there's separate search engines.
I think I'm still having trouble with the new stuff though. So I don't know, maybe a little search video on like specifically, because this is the issue and this is what you guys are recommending to tenants is to like look up the certificate of occupancy. So if there's a little primer, we could get it out to our networks and kind of have it as available on, the U of M site, on our Renters Commission site. That would be super awesome.
I will follow up and make sure that you guys get that, because I think we have that in our library.
Oh, great.
So I will make sure that I forward that to Kristen and make sure that you guys get that.
That would be great. Thank you so much. And then just 2 other small things. Actually, only one other small thing. This is like so minor tidbit, but caulking the toilets to the floor. We just had a friend that had a major water emergency because of that, because they didn't know it was actually leaking, and it ended up causing like $20,000 damage to her house. And so I'm wondering if anybody can explain like why we've decided that is a better thing than not. And so for you guys, I'm sorry, my wild animals are very wild out there, but hopefully you guys aren't hearing them too much. The toilets per the code have to be caulked around the bottom of the toilet, which means that if a toilet would just naturally kind of like have some leakage onto the floor, which is gross, but you would see it and you would probably say to your landlord, versus now, if it's caulked, the water can kind of seep down under. So I'm wondering, that's a very niche thing, but just wondering if I can get some insight on that specific piece of code.
So that is a Michigan plumbing code requirement that fixtures are caulked to the floor. And it's a sanitation requirement because that water that overflows or maybe that liquid that was misdirected will seep underneath that toilet and it can never be cleaned. So that's,
I guess I see that, but
that.
isn't that the water that's then coming through the ceiling in the bedroom underneath? Like, I guess isn't that the same dirty water that then would be coming through the ceiling if it caulks and it has nowhere else to go other than through the ceiling?
Well, I can tell you as a licensed master plumber that a properly installed toilet will not leak.
Okay. All right. Thank
Well,
you.
and I think at the core of that answer is if it is in the plumbing code, as we've talked about before, we don't have a lot of local control over code. You know, it's we would love to. Well, it's a catch-22. If every community has a different code and a different set of requirements, it's very hard for to own properties to be a landlord, a renter, or a building inspector or a plumber in any other city. But it doesn't allow us to make many individual adjustments. I can tell you there's a lot in the code I disagree with. But since we adopt it or the state adopts it for us, we have very little flexibility in it. I think that's probably the more straightforward answer to that question.
Great. Thanks. And thanks for being here tonight.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. And just quickly, did you mention, Derek, that rental housing services did have the plans to transfer data from eTrackit to Stream, or is that not going to happen?
It won't be transferred into it, but everything we have, we're working with our IT department so that there's separate search portals for it. It's being taken, packaged up, and then there'll be separate search engines to get at it. And that's similar rental, building, all of our different functions. It proved to be much more easier and accurate to do it that way than to try to input it into the news.
Right.
Gotcha.
We will, so eTrackit will be around for a while to the public. And then we have a separate stream. So if we have an opportunity, I can maybe show you guys how to do a search on Stream, but we will keep that separate because, like Derek said, we didn't want to run the risk of taking a contaminated system where we have a lot of duplicate records and stuff like that. We didn't want to take those things over to a new system. So we will keep the eTrackit system online for the public for as long as we possibly can and keep that infrastructure in place. However, our Stream system, a lot of new people, a lot of the new records for rental housing, we started in Stream. So you'll see 22 documents in Stream because we called a lot of people and said, hey, register now in Stream. And so they registered for their new renewals in Stream.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
And let me add to that. We've got a lot of property owners and managing agents that have chosen to apply for certified properties on Stream because they prefer it. They want to take advantage of the auto communications. They want to keep everything in one spot. So we are encouraging that, but we prioritize working on the properties that need inspection. So sometimes they sit on the back burner and then we can replicate that issuance that it had and track it. So that's been super nice to see as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that does sound like a game changer. So we'll move on to Nick.
Thanks. I'll try to be quick, but I was curious when we were talking about enforcement. One of the issues that I remember dealing with was too many people in a house beyond the occupancy limit of 6. And landlords allegedly would tell the tenants, 8 of you can live here, only 6 can sign the lease. And if the inspectors ever come, hide the mattresses in the attic. And that's one of those issues that kind of both parties were incentivized to keep quiet, right? Because the tenants wanted cheaper rent and they didn't mind, a little extra crowding to get cheaper rent or to live with their friends. And the landlords, of course, could maybe get away with charging a little extra for 8 rather than 6, what have you. And so what's the status of that? Is that still an issue? Is that something you look for? Is that something you only look for if somebody notifies you? Or is that a dead issue now?
Chris and I were talking about one of those today.
Well, I'm not going to answer for Chris. I know our inspectors look for it, but I think it's exactly as you described. The difficult part we have with a lot of things is Chris and his staff, all this, we know a lot. We know a lot of what goes on. Proving it is different and is more difficult. We have a lot of things that go on that we are quite confident we know are happening. And John will go to great lengths to make sure that myself or me, our staff, remember that to go to court or to write a ticket, we have to prove it. We can't just know it. And Nick, that it falls specifically into one of those categories. I'm sure it goes on all over the place. But our inspector in that brief window has to not only see it, but be able to prove it, or someone has to be able to prove it and provide us proof. And often it can't be enough that the neighbor says, well, we know this person lives there. We know so-and-so's girlfriend is there 6 nights of the week. We don't know if they pay rent or not, but we know they're there 6 nights of the week. You heard us talk about the number of units we have and the amount of inspections. Sitting and investigating a unit is very difficult in comparison to getting into more units and making sure they're safe. We deal with that all the time. I'm not doing a great job answering your question. We're aware it happens. It is an issue. There's a lot of them out there that we're aware of, that people aren't being necessarily 100% truthful with us. Taking the time to prove it is difficult at times.
Eric, you guys do ask for leases though. I mean, so for you guys, like at an inspection, if they have a suspicion, we have a couple of units that are like 2 units in the same house or something like that. So it can be kind of confusing. And we are frequently asked, can we see the lease? And we only have 6 in our units, so we don't ever get in trouble. But it is something that they do ask to see the actual written lease, and we'll match that up with the beds and the appearances of who's living there.
If it's apparent, if a landlord is silly enough to give us a lease with the wrong number of tenants on it compared to bedrooms and sleeping space, that would be great. You know what I mean? If they are able or turn that over without knowledge that they're, violating the ordinance. Rarely do we get that kind of compliance, or do we get a genuine, if they're willing to put more people in there and take the rent knowingly, rarely are they going to give us a genuine lease either. So
I will say that when I first started in 2009, we had a lot more than that. We had a lot more of that between 2009 and I'll say between 2000 and maybe 13 than we do now. And I'm going to say it's because of the increasing build and number of units available in the city. The new shiny apartments that are coming online, and just the sheer amount of space that people have to choose from now. And so we had some notorious landlords that were good at chopping up houses and literally putting kids in rooms that were the size of closets. And now they don't have an opportunity to do that anymore. So I think through education, I think through people having a opportunity or a variety of places to choose from now, you have the parents now that are saying, no, my child is not staying here. And so we don't have as much of that anymore. You still have some folks that are doing that, but we don't have as much of it. So we have a select group of people that still are trying to do that, but you don't have the buy-in anymore that you used to have. So we don't have to chase people down anymore. And we don't have the phone calls. It's complaint based now. When we have these situations, it's now strictly complaint based when someone thinks that something's up and this just doesn't look right. Or somebody sees an ad and sends it to us and says, hey, they're advertising for 7 bedrooms and they're only supposed to have 6. So that's now what we're how we get the information. It's no longer just on the inspections where we're seeing that, or we're getting it now complaint based.
Yeah, let me also say that 6 occupants is a zoning requirement for multifamily zoning districts. We also have restrictions within the housing code that require a certain amount of space per occupant. So whatever's more restrictive will apply. And we're making a point to list that number on certificates of compliance as well. So it's open and available information.
Thank you. Now I have like 2 more questions, and if any other commissioners want to ask questions, I think we're probably getting to the end of this session. But my first question is regarding one of the submitted questions about the rights and duties booklet. So it says here, and we've discussed this before, that if a tenant does not receive the rights and duties booklet that's required to be given to tenants, it can be reported through the complaint process. Then it was asked here, I'm reading, were there any fines issued in the past year? And the response was no, there have never been any tickets issued. The courts are responsible for issuing a fine. So what is the process like for, do you notify the courts that there is a violation so that they can issue the fine? Or I'm just curious.
So it's a violation, and we write the ticket, and then we get in, and then we submit the ticket, and actually John will go in to conduct the ticket. And then the courts is actually the ones that would determine the level of the fine. And I think John can speak better to that as far as how they determine. But it's up to $500, if I'm not mistaken. So they actually determine rental housing does not get the proceeds from that. So we don't, that doesn't come to us at all. But we just issue the ticket because it's a violation as part of our code. But then the courts just determine the actual fine.
So let me say things a little bit about enforcement. And the first thing about enforcement is education. Getting the word out there that this exists, and then educating people if they haven't done something that's in the code, why haven't they done it? Nowadays, landlords and tenants get the information concerning tenants' right, that booklet. They kind of get it emailed to them under 8525. And we all know that our charter, written back when dot matrix printers existed, requires that they be printed and certain color paper be used for sections. And it's, it's in the charter, and I know you folks have talked about that. But if we got a complaint that we didn't get the booklet, because that's on that complaint form, I think you know that, Zach, is like, hey, landlord, did you know? I had a conversation this week with a landlord that said, did you, and I asked them if they provided it. They say, no, we didn't do that. I said, well, you have to give them a copy as well. So I don't know if most tenants want that electronically or if they want it in paper. They're supposed to get it in paper, and I concede that. But with respect to the enforcement of that, step one would be, hey, I know you emailed it to them, but you're also supposed to give them a paper copy. Did you know that? And if it's like, oh, we didn't know that, we'll send it, we'll start doing that, we'll change our way, because all you got to do is come down to the second floor and we'll give you the books. Whoops. We'll give you the books to give you your tenants. So it's our printing, it's our paper. Here they are, send them out. So if they say, oh, we're not going to do that, then enforcement takes a different angle. Well, here's your ticket. We'll talk about this in court with the judge. So education is step one, and then you kind of go from there.
Yeah, I do appreciate that education has to be step one, and if there's repeated violations, then you escalate there. But I'm wondering,
repeated, or they say, yeah, we don't do that. We're not going to do that.
But they refuse,
then
sure.
That's recalcitrance would be a factor too.
Okay, gotcha. So since a fine has never been issued, or at least not in recent memory, it sounds like
I'm not aware that an infraction has ever been written for the failure to provide a booklet or that there's been a complaint. I'm not saying that, I don't know that we've ever gotten a complaint about not getting a paper booklet. Do you know, Chris or Alicia?
We've gotten a complaint, but we've never issued we've never issued a ticket at all.
Did the landlord say, what did the landlord atone for it and provide it?
Yes. They came down, got a ton of books from the clerk's office. And from what I can remember, Washington Apartment Association even came down and got a ton of books and rectified that whole situation. So we've never had to issue an infraction at all. We did get a complaint though.
Okay, that's good to know. And so if there were a situation where you told the landlord, they said, yes, I'll do it, and then you get another complaint the next year, and in that instance, would you think you would consider issuing a fine, or would you issue a ticket?
That would gravitate toward it, unless like, or different, the landlord or the office staff, they didn't know. Now, if they just systemically don't do it because they don't want to spend the postage, then that's more likely to warrant an infraction. And when someone was saying the infraction, we would write that could be a ticket for that, and the fines and costs would be meted out by the court, and they would determine that. That would be a civil infraction.
Okay, thank you. And my last question at the moment is regarding combustible appliance zone testing, CAS testing. And a landlord reached out to me wondering about this. So they were wondering if there were, what kind of tests are required in around areas with combustion appliances, natural gas, water heaters and heaters, etc. So is there currently a part of the inspection that deals with testing, or I guess determining the safety of combustion appliances?
We require a furnace clean and check document to be completed by a licensed mechanical contractor for both forced air furnaces and boilers.
Okay, so if there were an area that was not properly ventilated, even if the furnace was clean and they could prove that, do you think that could pose like a health hazard?
I think that's but
you'd have to define not properly ventilated for me.
Yeah, Chris, why don't you talk about the difference between a boiler and who can check that, and a furnace, who can check that, and what do they check for it, and what do they certify in that document? Because that might shed some light on this question.
Yeah. So our furnace clean and check document, one of the most important factor is that we have a spot for them to tell us what the carbon monoxide test results are. And what a typical contractor does is they open up the access door to the actual plenum, and they put a CO detector right in there, one that actually has a numeric reading, which is typical. And they will actually see what levels of CO are coming through. We expect to see 0. And that's going to be an indication of if there's a cracked heat exchanger or not. We also look at the gas valve. They look at the gas control valves, the gas shutoffs, the venting itself, making sure that it's entirely intact. That pretty much covers your typical furnace. So boilers can be a little different. Your average single family boiler, that clean and check can be done by a licensed mechanical contractor, but in an apartment building, anything over 6 units with what's actually defined as a boiler over 200,000 BTUs, those actually require a state certification and periodic inspections at the state level. Those are commonly referred to as CSD1 tests, and depending on the size of the boiler and the occupancy, those CSD1s are sometimes yearly, sometimes every 3 years. It's a 3-year license for the state. So that's one of the things we do with state boilers is we make sure that it's got current state certification as well, which is of utmost importance.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. I'll have to do more research myself on the current test for furnaces, et cetera, and touch base with the landlord to see exactly what answers they're looking for. Does anyone else have any questions?
I'd like to add at the end here, as long as there's no questions, that one, if there's more questions on gas-fired appliances in the inspection process, again, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here. Chris can make himself available, or one of our staff who specializes in this, directly to that landlord if they'd like to have that conversation, or to you. It doesn't have to be a back and forth conversation. We'd be glad to participate in it directly, whether it's on Zoom or make ourselves available in the field to do so. It's something we'd be grateful to participate in that conversation. Second, from an overall standpoint, a lot of what I heard today, and I think it rings true with what we're trying to do. 5 or 6 years ago, Alicia took over the whole entirety of the building and rental program with one goal in mind, and that was in part to revamp the rental system and how we operate, to be more forward thinking, to be more proactive, to partner more with the rental community, to be more consistent, and to be predictable in our process and rote in how we do things. So, and in our hope that it makes things boring, but it also helps us gain that compliance is what we want. COVID came and threw us all sideways, especially the rental program. Alicia and her staff deserve a ton of credit for even keeping it up and running when a lot of cities just shut down through that period and figuring out a way to get into properties, but it sent us sideways and set us back a number of years. And when you throw the change in the software, our goal in this communication, and we are appreciative to be here, is to find ways to do more education, to be more proactive, to simplify the process and focus on the things that are important, both from a safety issue and other issues. We do struggle with getting involved from a rental standpoint in the landlord-tenant issues, because our system, our entire process is so heavily set up to inspect the structures, to focus on the safety of the structures, the places where the tenants live and the residents of the city live, and to make sure those are safe. The landlord-tenant relationship issues are something we're all kind of new into getting into, and we understand those are important as well, but we're doing our best to work with John. But really what we want to do and what we hope in this partnership going forward from our staff standpoint is find ways to do better education, to be more proactive, and to work out a process that is beneficial to everybody, especially when it comes to the safety of those structures. So we think we're back on track now with that. I think we're doing a better job. Hopefully, I can't tell you, I've lost the landlord that was on the picture here, but I can't tell you how much appreciative I am for those comments. That means a lot to us. We don't hear that often. And it's what we are striving to do and to improve that relationship and our predictability. So we appreciate the time here. And if there's anything else we can do, we'll be glad to come back and answer questions or have more. As you can tell, we love to have detailed discussions on this. We love this stuff. So if there's anything we can do, it'll probably be Alicia and Chris in the future. They're better at this and know a lot more about it than I do, but we appreciate the opportunity to be here and thank you.
And I did, while we were chatting, I did kind of go online and just look to see on stream. So I don't want to take up too much more time here, but there is a help guide. So if you're having problems with the stream search engine, there is a help guide and it is a PDF. And if you go in there and just type in search, it will give you step-by-steps. There's pictorials on there to show you how to do a search, but it is it's not too bad. But you do have to make sure that you have just under the search engine or under the search address or bar, you have to click exact phrase, and then that will give you, like if you type in the address, it'll give you everything that is attached to that address. And like I said, for rental housing stuff, look for CR, and then it'll highlight CR, and then those are certified rental records. So you just kind of have to know what the prefixes are. So for short-term rental is STR, for rental is CR, for building permit is BLD, GCR, whatever. So there is a help guide on there for you. And if you have any issues, please contact us. Our rental housing department, our building department, be more than happy to help you.
Thank you. I appreciate you looking at it.
And that search bar too also uses predictive text, and all of our addresses are stored in there. So you get a couple in, and it's going to start to ask, do you mean this property, and certified rentals are in what we call the license module. So that screen will default to permits. You'll have to go to the left side and click licenses.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. And before you leave, I just wanted to say thank you again. And one question we didn't get to, but I don't expect an answer now. But one thing that we will do eventually want to hear from you, probably over email or if you come back, is how can the Renters Commission help advocate for you for rental housing services to make sure that you all have the resources and the rules that you all need to make sure that you're functioning as best as you can. But thank you again.
Yeah, thank you for that, Zach. That's very kind. We appreciate it.
Yes, very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
All right. Now, thanks everyone for the awesome questions. I really appreciate all that. I'm wondering if we could take a 10-minute break, perhaps, and come back at 9:17. If you, that's only if you all want, though. Do you think is anyone interested in that? Yeah, show of hands, thumbs up if you want, thumbs down if you just want to keep going.
I just want to flag I have to hop off at 10, so I'm fine with a break, but just flagging that in case we need quorum for something.
I also have to leave at 10.
Okay. In that case, I actually think that we should keep going, and as this goes on, we can always choose to take a break later if we still have quorum. Okay. But if you need to stand up and go to the bathroom or get a glass of water, feel free to just turn your camera off, and we'll assume that you're if you don't respond, that you're doing something important, and you can just come back after. Okay. So let's see. That was 6-A. Now we can go to 6-B, which is a discussion of the memorandum regarding enforcement processes and challenges for right to renew and early leasing ordinances. And there's an attachment here. I can pull this up. Here we go. So was everyone able to take a look at this memorandum? It's been out since February 15th. We didn't really have a whole lot of time. We didn't have any time at the last meeting to discuss it, but was everyone able to read it? And what are your initial thoughts? Do you have any questions, concerns about it? Hannah.
Yeah, I read it. I had just one question, because I know this has come up multiple times, and maybe it's already been clarified, but this memo, I believe, is where it made clear that leases before the right to renew ordinance will not, leases that weren't adjusted or changed before that ordinance, it will not apply to. And I remember that being a question at a few meetings, whether existing leases, whether right to renew would apply to them. So is this taking for the word that leases entered into before the ordinance date, right to renew does not apply to?
I'm looking through here. I can't remember if that was included in here. I know that is, to the best of my knowledge, that's the position of the city. But I'm not sure if anyone remembers if that was expressly stated in the.
It's in there, right when the section titled "Right to Renew Ordinance." It's the first line of that section.
Right here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
the
yeah.
Second sentence. I'm sorry.
Yeah. The ordinance applies to leases entered into, renewed, or renegotiated after that date. So yes, thank you, Hannah, for pointing that out. That is part of the memorandum.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Any other comments or concerns? Lucy.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the bullet point on page 2 where where it identifies the reasons why some ELO complaints aren't founded. So there's 3 reasons identified there that the landlord contacted them about renewing, and that was also they felt pressure and they might have renewed, but it doesn't actually violate the language itself. The second thing, that they were placed on a waiting list, and the third thing, that the tenant found new housing. So I think this is this section to me is the most interesting that we need to discuss, because it reveals the ways in which the ordinance itself is not addressing the problem that it's intended to address. And I'm wondering, I guess, if people have thoughts about what we should do there. I mean, maybe that's amending the language to address multiple situations. I mean, the wait list situation, I guess we're dealing with independently, though we haven't come up with the remedies for that. The third one, I think that one was a little bit puzzling to me, because you could still go through a complaint even if you found new housing, right? It would still have been violated. So I was wondering if those tenants were being encouraged to drop the complaint, or if they had just chosen to do that. Yeah, just, there's a lot of interesting stuff here. But I was, wondering if people had any thoughts about how we could make the ordinance stronger, if maybe Attorney Reiser, if that's what you think is needed here, is an amendment to the language, or how you think we could best get to a point where we're addressing the problem that the ordinance was set out to address.
Number 3 bullet point 3 wouldn't necessarily be that it's unfounded, but it's just that it's closed out. It's like, you kind of need a complainant to proceed. You need someone to call to the stand and say what happened and when did you get this that communication. And some tenants just say, you know what, I don't like this landlord. I just want to move on. I want to be done with it. So that's closed out would be a more appropriate way to describe bullet point 3, really. We're not going to force somebody who doesn't want to deal with a landlord anymore to come to court and talk about a relationship they just want away from. So some have moved on.
And just to clarify, it's a direct response there. This is not saying that tenants who do move on cannot pursue a complaint.
No, of course not. No, but some just say, the hell with it. I just want to get this new place. I've got a better place. I've got, better space, and they just don't want it. That's kind of what that's for.
Okay, thanks, John. Then we'll move on to Nick. You're muted.
Sorry, I'm going to pass for now. I'm going to lower my hand.
Gotcha. Thanks, Nick.
But I might have a comment later.
Okay. Hannah.
Yeah, just a quick note, since Lucy, I'm glad you said that, just like pointing out the section. I feel like in the waitlist discussion, this is just helpful if this commission brings forth something in terms of regulating fees. I think this resource is great to have, to point to that bullet point about waiting list in particular, to show that it's unfounded here because it was actually a waitlist ask, therefore it doesn't violate the thing. I just think it's good that now we have the language to point to that as evidence for any future thing. So it's not fun to look at, but at least we have it instead of just saying that's what we've heard.
Yeah, definitely. And to know that tenants see the waitlist fees and are confused, and they think this is the same as renewing, or they think that it's affected by early leasing ordinance, which is my understanding here. That's interesting. It's good to know. Jamie.
Just wondering if this is information that we could, if we would continue to have access to as complaints come in. Just thinking in terms of like changing language, it might be helpful to have a little more information as things kind of progress.
So I suppose that would be a question for either Kristen or John. I know that we've had access to some previous ELO complaints. Will we continue to have access? And if so, how will that be achieved?
can request them from rental housing, and then they would go through the same redaction process as FOIA to before we could provide them to you. Do you think you want those maybe quarterly, or how? I missed the beginning of the question. Want me to do like a quarterly request with rental housing, or
Well, and I wasn't even thinking exactly, like, I don't feel like we would, at least from my perspective, I wasn't thinking like drilling into the details. Just like that little summary of like, this was unfounded and this was why. Like, and maybe just seeing how many complaints are coming in. Quarterly would probably be appropriate. That would be my opinion, but
yeah, I could follow up about it. I asked them often, I didn't before this meeting, if there's anything relevant going on that they'd like to share, and they don't, they haven't shared so far, but if we ask specifically, they would likely be able to give it to us in advance of the meeting. So I'll ask them, let you know.
I do want to say I'm very happy to have clarity on how these complaints are supposed to be dealt with. I know it's been said verbally a couple times, but having it in writing is great. And I think that informing tenants that this is the process, that you access the complaint online on the website, then you email it to Janet Farrell. That's good to know, so we can pass that on to tenants. And if there's an issue with that process as we go along and we realize that this is not working, at least we know what the process is, so we can propose changes. So this is great. So I know that I think Travis and Cynthia, you both met with the administrator on this. So thank you for doing that. Lucy.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up one more issue from the memo, which is the last portion about the difficulties on the staff side in terms of managing the complaints and investigating them. So one issue that's named in the memo is that Janet Farrell, who had been fielding the complaints, her salary is from the housing budget, not the budget that should be used. So she can't keep fielding these complaints. So the city staff is looking for other avenues for processing these complaints. That's a really interesting part of the memo to me, because on the tenants organizing side, one of the things that we have, and we did a huge push back when ELO was first pushed, is we try to get people to systematically file complaints. Say, like, here the city is set up, we just passed this ordinance, the city's set up to do this, and we flyer around a lot, we have conversations with people, and we say, you can file this complaint. So now with this background information being like, okay, that might actually not be the most effective way of filing complaints, there's a little bit of the tenants movement in the city are a bit out of sync. So I just want to flag this as a problem that I think is really important and worth continuing to think about, maybe in the staff and the Renters Commission together. I don't know a lot about where a budget would come for this, but it seems worth spending some money on to me. And yeah, I mean, and also with what the staff was saying about how their focus is more on the structural inspection than it is with the contractual and relational stuff. It seems like we maybe need to think about creating a new department for something like that and allocating some funds for that.
Yeah, thank you, Lucy. I appreciate that. And yeah, I'm realizing I don't think I really recognize how much work members of GEO had done trying to get people to file complaints in the first place. I totally forgot about that. So thank you for your work and the work of others on that. Would some of the council members, would either of you like to respond about what you think might help the situation if Janet's a bit constrained here, and it sounds like from rental housing services that there might be need for people to work on enforcement for the contractual or the regulation of contracts and how those are observed. Do you have any ideas for how to make the situation better? We would love to hear.
Yeah, so we are heading into a budget process here, a budget cycle here. And so I know that we have been in conversations with the city administrator about whether or not we need to allocate for an additional staff member, what that looks like, what those needs are. Obviously, staffing, the day-to-day staffing decisions are administrators' purview. The budgeting portion is our purview. And so we're basically asking him what support is needed in order to make sure that this enforcement process can continue, and frankly to probably be improved, because as Lucy noted, this is not really what Janet was initially intended to be doing. And so we're looking at that. I know budgets are very tight this year, but this is something that we have consistently been asking for. And so we're continuing to work with the administrator as we go into this next cycle. So hopefully we'll have some clarity here soon.
Gotcha. Thank you. Let us know how we can be helpful in that process. Okay, any other comments on this memorandum? I know that I can't remember who all is going to be at this meeting, but there's going to be a meeting, is it later this month, regarding this memorandum among a few commissioners to discuss it more so in depth. I know I think Nick and Lucy, and I don't remember who else are intending to be there. Okay. Well, if anyone else is interested in getting into the details of this memorandum and trying to understand exactly what was meant in here, and how we all feel about it, just send an email, I suppose, to Kristen. Sorry, Kristen, to send everything your way, but I think Kristen can help connect you with this small group that's meeting about the memorandum.
Yes, and that is on Thursday next week at 5:30.
Thank you, Kristen. Very impressive that you know that on hand. Okay. Anything else to be said about this memorandum before I move on?
Really useful to have it, so thanks to whoever wrote it.
Yes.
Mr. Reiser.
I wrote some of it. I didn't write it. It's got Milton's name on it, and Milton wrote it as far as everybody knows.
Great. We are appreciative. So we can move on to the next item, which is 6-C, resolution in support of an ordinance to ban natural gas connections. That's in new construction. I can pull that up here. Now, I apologize for having this put on the agenda sort of late, but I wasn't intending to introduce this until not too long before this meeting. Can everyone see the resolution? Great. Now, I do have a couple amendments that I'm going to propose to it, but the basic outline is that there's I think a zoning change that's was proposed in the Planning Commission. I think there's members of the Planning Commission who are very frustrated that lots of new developments are being proposed that contain natural gas instead of all electric. We had some call-ins earlier about the benefits of having all electric, and that is part of the 8-to-0 plan to make sure that buildings, I think it's starting in 2022, we're going to be built without natural gas. So that was the assumption in our carbon neutrality plan. So that hasn't happened yet. We still have quite a few buildings. I think 30 buildings was mentioned by one of the callers that are either being constructed or in the advanced stages of planning that will have natural gas in them. So I think one of the major issues, obviously you have the climate aspect where we're investing as a community in more fossil fuel infrastructure, which is very problematic, as we know we are supposed to be leaving that, departing from that. There's also the public health aspect, which was mentioned by some of the commenters. I did not realize fully how serious that was until I started reading some of these research papers. I read that up to 14%. There's an estimate of what percent of asthma cases in children are the result of natural gas appliances in their homes, and that was about 14%. I mean, that's staggering, absolutely staggering. On top of that, we have a lot of known carcinogenic chemicals that are coming from just leaking natural gas that hasn't been combusted, or what's especially dangerous is the results of combustion or incomplete combustion. If you go down the list and you start reading about it, it's very shocking that we've allowed this poor level of air quality in our homes. So for those reasons, for the climate reason, for public health, and I think that we should seriously consider this. I think we should take a vote on it if we can reach consensus tonight. And also, I know there were concerns about the economics of it. We don't want to be sticking renters with a higher utility bill. However, I'll point out that this is only for new constructions. And I know it's mentioned that for major renovations. And I did look into what was meant by that in the Planning Commission. And I believe, if I understand it correctly, it's for natural gas would not be allowed in renovations that cost more than 50% of the assessed value of the property. So that's a huge renovation. That's like rebuilding a significant section of the building. So that's going to be pretty rare. It's going to be mostly in new constructions. And I know that there's a particular concern about sticking lower income tenants with maybe an increased electric bill. And just to respond to that, I don't think that lower income tenants will be the ones who are living in some of these new constructions. They're generally not aimed towards lower income tenants. So I don't think it's as big of a concern as I personally thought it might be. That being said, I hope you can read through it. If you have any questions about it, I guess I'll open up for questions first, and then we can talk about the pre-minor amendments. Oh, wow. Okay. Nick.
Before you get into questions, Zachariah, are you planning to take a vote on this? And if so, do you want to move and second it before opening discussion?
Sorry. Yeah, I would like to take a vote on it tonight. And I would like to move to introduce it, or I guess to start a discussion rather, right? So I'll make the motion. Do we have a second to open up discussion on this resolution? Seconded by Lucy, I think. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No, you
wait a minute.
You don't want to vote on it yet. You need to move it and second it, and then you can open discussion, and then you can take a vote.
Oh, I thought that we had to vote to open discussion.
Just moving it and seconding it opens that up. Yep.
Excuse me. Okay, thank you. So discussion is open. Thank you, Lucy, and thank you, Travis. So now we'll go through the list. Nick.
I'm ready. So I just want to clarify. First of all, thank you. This is a meticulously researched and drafted resolution. Kudos to the drafter. It's really well done. My question, though, is kind of like a process. When you go down to the end, it's a resolution to urge the Planning Commission to urge council to pass an ordinance. And the Planning Commission already seems like they're predisposed to do that. So we're just kind of lending our voice to this proposal. It doesn't sort of carry, it's symbolic, right?
Yeah, it's mostly symbolic, but its effects don't necessarily need to be symbolic. I think that showing that there's large public support from different angles, from environmental angle, from thinking in the best interest of tenants, I think it might have an effect on getting this through our city government more quickly.
And my second question is maybe kind of off the wall, maybe for the landlords here. Is there any kind of, are you perceiving that tenants care one way or the other about the choice of natural gas as opposed to electric? In other words, do they look at an apartment and say, great, electric or blue gas or something like that? Do you see anything like that?
That's a good question. So frankly, I think most tenants haven't thought about it very thoroughly. But what I do know is that a lot of tenants are concerned about the climate crisis. And when they find out about the public health implications of natural gas, they're also concerned about that. So I think that once it's explained to them, I think that they're generally supportive. I know we had a caller who is a tenant who is supportive of trying to do anything we can to make rental units more environmentally friendly, more efficient. And I think this is part of it. That's why electrification was included in the 8-0 plan. I think that there are a couple issues. I know I spoke with Jordan about this. Like electric dryers aren't that great. That might frustrate some people. I know I don't even use a dryer personally. I just hang my clothes, even in the winter, but on the inside of my apartment. So I think there might be some behavioral changes that would be necessary, but in terms of heating, I think there wouldn't be a significant difference in the lives of tenants. In terms of cooking, so long as the appliances that are installed are good ones, and that is an if, there wouldn't be a major difference. Induction cooking is very efficient. I have never used induction, like I've never had it in my home. I've used it before, but it's pretty fantastic. It's actually better in my opinion than gas. So in all, I don't think a lot of tenants have really thoroughly considered this, but when it's laid out for tenants, especially younger ones, I think that they can see that major action on climate change is required. So I think that they are supportive. Does that answer your question, Nick? Great. Okay, Jordan.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I talked to Zachariah, but I think there are some things that I question from a renter's perspective. Okay, so the costs of operation can be up to 30% higher. And I think most of the people in the city and on planning commission will admit that. And I'm worried that ends up becoming a poor tax, right? So I, as the landlord, will likely get some sort of tax incentive from the city, from the state, from DTE to purchase this electric thing. But I'm worried that then for my tenants that pay utilities, they're going to be paying higher. So I think that's a valid concern. And I don't feel comfortable endorsing something like this without more substantial information on what the city plans to do to mitigate those costs for the most vulnerable tenants. So that's my biggest thing. But a couple of other things are, I mean, like you mentioned, the dryers, we have houses that have, lots of people that live in them and use dryers. And so having to increase our number of dryers for if we do a large remodel, which we do, I mean, a lot of landlords gut houses and do big remodels. For an example, today, we actually just found out one of our large steam boilers died. It is probably going to be about $25,000 to replace for gas. And they told us well over $100,000 for electric. So I hear that it's new construction. I do think that if we are pushing, so I guess for me, I think most of us folks are the same people pushing for affordable housing. If we're pushing for affordable housing and we're building it, that tax can be on these tenants over the next 10 years. So that's the part I'm a little bit most concerned about. I'm a little unconvinced about the actual health risks, I guess, as a clinician who's looked through the research, as a mom of 2 asthmatic kids. I'm still doing more research there, but most stuff says we really need to be, if we're concerned about lungs, to be focusing on cars and other sources of pollution. So I guess I understand that we can put barriers up, but it just feels like in a city where we just went multiple days without power and people literally survived in their homes because of gas appliances. This is a hard sell for me because we were, without power. I told Zachariah that all home generators that are like the Generac generators that cut on when your power goes out, which we have a fair amount of people that do have, those are all natural gas. So I guess for me, 2 things would make me feel better about this. A, having a plan, knowing what the city is going to do to help our most vulnerable renters, because that I think is our job and what we've committed to by being on the commission. And the second piece being, I wonder if there's a way to kind of piecemeal this together in the beginning, because, it sounds like stoves and furnaces are the big concerns, but water heaters and dryers have the most potential to affect renters. So the other thing is the recovery time. So the time for a water heater to heat up is almost double. So if I have a house that has 6 girls in it right now, I have a gas water heater, they can shower. They can all get ready before they go out. If we switch to electric, I either need to add a second one or there's some trouble getting the water heated. And so I haven't resolved those issues. I'm open to it. We, I think, are the first landlords in town with an e-bike to carry all of our tools around. So this is an important thing to our family, but I am worried about renters for those reasons. And I'm open to learning more, but just wanted to make sure that we're thinking about our most vulnerable renters.
Absolutely. And just to respond to a couple of those concerns, which some of which I have shared and a few I still do share. I think that, this is not going to affect the majority. It's only going to affect a sliver of the rental units for a while. That sliver will grow as more units are constructed. So I think that this really will not have a huge impact for a while, but I don't think it makes sense as a city to allow major investments in fossil fuel infrastructure that we know we're not going to keep. Because eventually, I really strongly believe that natural gas is going to be phased out. And when that happens, we will be switching over to electric. So you will have invested in natural gas connections and also natural gas appliances that we don't even know how long we're going to be able to continue to use those. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And of course, the emissions that are associated with it are very high. There are technical details I'm not positive about the recovery time. I've heard that you can have larger water tanks to allow a larger amount of water to be warmed, which would, although the recovery time would continue to stay long, you would still have more warm water on hand. I will point out that that most gas appliances don't function during an outage, and that those with gas generators would be able to continue to have those gas generators and use them. Just in newer houses, you wouldn't be able to obviously have the hookup there. You would have to rely either on a gasoline generator. I'm not sure what the alternatives are. I mean, maybe once we have an SEU, perhaps we could hook up to that. And the last thing is that I think that there are things that the city could do. I'll let eventually. Obviously, Travis, you want to ask some questions about this, but I know that there are some climate resiliency centers that are being opened by OSI and by the city. So that there are other alternatives to keep people safe, even when our power fails. And that's important, not only for people with totally 100% electric, but for everybody, because a lot of natural gas appliances don't work during power outages. Yeah. I'll pass it over to Lucy.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't understand the technicalities of all of this, of course, and it's not really my place to comment on that as the Renters Commission, but I do think that this is a really great resolution. I think that we should vote for it insofar as it would have a negative impact on renters. I want to comment on that point specifically because I think things like this come up a lot when we're trying to pass progressive legislation around climate change or anything else, that there's kind of like a boogeyman that it's going to hurt people who are marginalized. These kinds of things help people that are marginalized. Marginalized people are the people who are most severely impacted by the climate crisis. And with respect to housing affordability, the best thing that we can do for housing affordability is to pass proactive legislation that protects renters, not by not passing climate-based policies. So I wouldn't pit those two things together. I don't think that's fair, and I don't think that that's effective. This is something that would help renters, as would things like rent control, much more affordable housing. And as Zachariah was saying, this is going to be a lot of development, so it's important that we make sure that it's done sustainably. In terms of the power outage stuff, what we need is better infrastructure and probably municipal power on that level if we want to get through our power outages, not passing not encouraging more natural gas and gas-based power. That's just my perspective on it. I think this is great in spirit. Again, I can't comment on the details, but I wouldn't say like renters and high rents is the thing that should get in the way of this. We already have incredibly high rents. There are already not any protections for us. My rent, I just found out a couple days ago, my rent is going up $200 a month. And though we need to tackle that directly, not indirectly by this. So I would say this is a great resolution. I think it's, really well written, really exciting and important.
Thank you, Lucy. I will point out that I didn't do 100% of this resolution. I got a lot of information from different sources, including from the draft letter from OSI. It was very helpful. And some community members also pitched in. And I also got some feedback from some Energy Commission members, which was really great. I know that I didn't mention this, but the Energy Commission is considering a very similar resolution in support. And I'm not sure if the Environmental Commission is officially going to be considering this during this month's meeting, but I heard from a commissioner that they're interested in doing that. Yeah, I think that the costs of inaction are quite large. And in terms of the cost of electric appliances, I know that there was the Inflation Reduction Act, which I know is going to offer rebates for heat pumps, I think both for air and water heater heat pumps, which is really exciting. And I'm expecting more of that kind of legislation on the federal level, probably the state level, maybe even the city level, which would be fantastic. But I'll move it over to Travis.
Thank you. I am not going to weigh in too much because I don't want to skew conversation at all. And I actually was just going to laud the commission for taking this up because this is a pretty hot topic in the city right now. And I think it's really important to add a rental voice to that conversation. And so because this is being discussed on the Energy Commission where I am, and I will certainly have the ability to weigh in at the council table on the content itself. I want you guys to be able to kind of work out what makes the most sense for your perspective. The one request that I will make is in the final resolved clause, and Nick kind of alluded to this already, from kind of more of a process standpoint, I would request that you guys consider making a modification to urge and direct, or to urge and advise council rather than the planning commission, just because that should be your role, is really to make your recommendations and your advice to council. And similarly, I would ask other commissions not to tell you guys what you guys should be working on and doing. And so I think potentially, if you want to make sure that there's planning commission visibility on it, I think you could make that change where you're actually asking council to take action, and then potentially an additional resolved clause asking for the resolution to be distributed to members of planning commission as well. But that way your official request is to council.
It makes perfect sense. I'd support changing it in that way. And the only reason, I was talking to Energy Commission members just to make sure that all the details were correct. And I know there was a discussion at the last commission meeting. I don't want to imply that they were saying, you should do this, you should do that.
And I think they were making the same change, or at least that was requested of them as well.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll propose an amendment in that way. Thanks. Robert.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, I do support this, and even though we have 2 existing old houses, we're still making plans to partially electrify them. I want to point out a couple of things. I've done a lot of research. Heat pumps and heat pump water heaters are very slow to react. So certain use cases fail pretty badly in these situations. So I wanted to point that out. The other thing is, I'd like everybody to go into this eyes wide open that it is highly likely, in my opinion, to raise rates. Here's why. We're going to get new buildings that are all electric, and they're going to be the shiny new green thing, and they're going to have higher rents because they are a preferred commodity, to be honest. The rest of us are going to be dragged kicking and screaming, whether we want to or not, into the prevailing rent situation that happens. If your rent is real low, then nobody wants, everybody kind of looks at it and says, God, what is this, a dump or something? So you're kind of dragged along. So just be aware that while I think this is a very good thing, it will create conditions where I think rents are going to go up. And I just have to point that out. Like I said, I support it, but let's go in without too many rosy assumptions.
Thanks, Robert. I certainly would not like that outcome. I'm not convinced that is exactly what will happen, given what's occurred in some other cities. But I could see I can imagine what you're putting forward. I certainly hope that doesn't happen. And to respond to something that Jordan mentioned, I wonder if it would be possible to, or I wonder if, we should include something about calling on city council, or I guess since, we have to give directly to city council to explore the idea of rebates and that sort of thing to see if we can
that, I mean, that would ease my, like, I'm generally in with these principles. I do worry about the small things with the practicality for large units, but you're right. I mean, a large remodel like that is probably relatively few and far between, but I think just making sure that we are not, and largely that comes from like, and I know Cynthia also works with, like Black and brown communities. I just worry that we also pass this legislation without directly addressing those things. And in the communities that I work with, I don't want it to be another thing that we are doing in Ann Arbor that doesn't explicitly speak to the potential, that potential harm, I guess. And so that would make me feel better if we put something in there like that.
Yeah, most definitely. I think that will, some of these climate adaptation measures and mitigation measures, I think it's very important to make it easiest for the people who need it the most to make those adaptations, to make to change over to being more sustainable. Because I mean, throughout on so many issues, it is clear that we can't allow the bill to be footed by the people who are going to be most impacted by climate change. It doesn't make any sense. So I would support including some kind of resolve clause, suggesting to city council that they investigate rebates on electric appliances for rental units. Okay.
To be clear, I don't think that we should put the rebate on the unit, because then I'm going to get the rebate as a landlord, which I think we're already going to get anyways. But I think that we need to specifically investigate rebates for increased utility costs.
I see.
The renters who pay utilities. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. We need to have a whole discussion on that. I like that a lot more, actually, but the details, there's a lot of ways that could go. So I would love to talk to you about that more. Jamie.
Thank you. Yeah, kind of building off the discussion of the rebates, that was kind of my first thought, was that this is awesome and this is great and everyone deserves to live in a clean environment with clean air. But I agree with Bob that I could see landlords using this as a justification to raise rents just across the board. Because I'm assuming, kind of as Jordan mentioned, the cost for this is about stoves specifically, or are we talking furnaces? Either way, I'm sure the cost is a lot more, so therefore that's going to translate into increased rent cost, which is going to drive up the average rent price, I think, for everyone. So I would just be interested to kind of look more into the unintended consequences, just in terms of like, how much is this going to increase costs for landlords, and which is therefore going to be translated down to renters. I'm also wondering about availability of some of these. And again, I don't know enough about like this technology appliances, whatever we're talking about, to speak to like the supply side, but I would wonder if I would hate to have something like this slow production of new units, where I think that is what's most important in Ann Arbor. That's my personal opinion, but I think we just need more units. So I would just be curious as to the unintended consequences of something like this, investigating that a little bit more.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. To my knowledge, there isn't a shortage of electric heat pumps, either for air or water. And I think that the market's only going to grow as the technology is becoming a lot more popular, and there's going to be more and more requirements. I think there are already, I can't remember how many cities that do require this. I think there are some counties as well. Most of them are on the West Coast, I think. But to also just to respond to the cost element, there was a report that I linked here from the Rocky Mountain Institute, and they claimed that they ran the numbers and it was actually cheaper in terms of upfront costs and over 15 years to build a new construction. I think this is specifically for houses, so that is a little bit different, but for a house in 7 different municipalities around the country, it was cheaper both in terms of upfront cost and over 15 years to build all electric rather than natural gas. And on top of that, there's also the externalities, the other costs that we don't account for, including the health cost and environmental cost, et cetera, that we would be removing by no longer having natural gas. But I appreciate your comments.
Yeah, thank you.
Jeff.
Sorry, my mute button was hidden there. I too kind of would like to do a little bit more research. As I'm a chemist. This is a big thing. I agree with this 100%. I wish we were already all electric, but the concerns I have are, shorter term. If the electricity is coming from fossil fuels, how much will it offset, at least in the short term, right? But in addition to that, I do have concerns about, the bill that is going to be coming in. I know that a lot of our electric companies have programs to help those that are lower income. I do think that being for newer construction, that wouldn't be as big of an issue. I do agree with that, because the nice shiny new apartments are not things that the average person, just in general, I think, can afford. So I question the impact, at least globally, at least in the short term. So I'm really kind of torn on that. And of course, just market value of rents. I live in Pheasant Run, which was that complex that made the Michigan Daily a couple months ago, about them raising the rents by 30%. Right? Hi, that's me. And I went through that, right? And do they find that their claim was that this was about the rent increases were about the market value, meeting the market value. And do they find that market values in general increase as these kinds of places, which are going to be more expensive anyway, come online?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I've never read anything that indicates that would increase rents for an area. I can look more into that and do some more reading on that. But again, I think if there's a decent chance that units or buildings are going to have to switch over to all electric in the next decade or decade and a half, and I think that there's a pretty good chance that we're going to at least phase natural gas out. There is going to be a cost in switching over. I just think that it's either now or later, and I'd prefer that we do it now so we don't have to make investments in infrastructure we're not going to need for much longer. But yeah, I totally understand your concerns there. And in terms of the utility help, I've heard some pretty negative things about the low income help, at least from DTE. So I don't have a lot of confidence in that. That is a serious problem. Lucy.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on, this is like a spin on what Jeff was saying, I think, but one reason that the rents go up is precisely because the new building projects are catered towards a wealthier audience. So they're building more expensive apartments, the rents are higher, then they're paying more, and all of our rents are going up. Doesn't have anything to do with utilities. So yeah, this is the same point I made before, but what we need in the city are protections around affordable housing. The city does not have any ordinances that say you have to build this many affordable units. We don't have rent control here, obviously. So those are the things that we need to be doing to counteract all rent increases, not these workarounds that have to do with other people's policies. I did also want to mention that I spoke to a couple of people on the Renters Commission about the gas and electricity, and all of them could not give me a straight answer on if they thought if it was clear that electricity was more expensive. So I don't know if there's some research or a report or some kind of resource that kind of explains the cost differences in these kinds of energy, but I would like to know a little bit more about that if it's available.
Yeah, and I will also mention that our energy mix right now is pretty dirty in this area of Michigan. It's notoriously bad, actually. But I don't think that's going to stay that way, and I know that it's going to, energy from our buildings is going to continue to be dirty if we invest in natural gas. But if we switch to electric, there's at least a possibility to make things better. On top of that, natural gas costs could fluctuate quite a bit going forward. I don't know. Jeff.
I'm sorry, I forgot to put my hand down after I was done.
No worries. Done.
Yes, first off, I think Jordan's idea is really good to get the rebate for the tenant, but I don't think it will have any conflicts if we could try to have the rebate if it is really a good high cost for both the landlord and the tenant. But next question is that because we were all talking about the cost of the electrics cities. So is it possible? I'm just thinking for the long runs, like you mentioned, maybe it's even cheaper. It might be even cheap. Like we really don't know. I think it's possible. So maybe for the long run, it might be even cheaper or whatever. We really don't have any really solid status will show that it's not going to be even price-wise will be a lot better. So maybe we need more information like that to learn a little bit the things about the price and the cost of the things from the futures perspective. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Robert, and do you prefer Bob? I'm sorry.
Normally I go by Bob. Either way is just fine.
Okay.
Just wanted to make a really quick comment since I do have anecdotal information that heat pumps that work well in this cold climate are only recently available, and they may change this answer, but the geothermal systems that were installed prior to that also require electric resistance heating in the coldest days, and so January and December heat bills tend to be very high for a pure electric system. So again, I think ultimately we'll get there, but short to medium term, I do not think that the assumption should be the costs will go down.
Thanks, Bob. Nick.
Thanks. So I am not an energy or a climate expert. Many people here know more about that than I do. And I know that you are very involved, Zachariah, with citizens, Ann Arbor Citizens for Public Power. I don't trust DTE as far as I can throw them. I think that we are heading, and I am troubled by promoting electric power when we're not even talking about solar or other alternative forms of energy. And and while I like many things about what we're doing here, I would probably normally say, this is something I don't want to have brought on, a day before and vote on. It's something normally that I would want to really think about how we can have an impact, not just, and I think Lucy was kind of making this point, not just an isolation of good climate policy, but how it ties in with affordability and what we're really trying to do here on the Renters Commission. And, and I'm also, Jordan raised some really excellent points as well. I mean, we were without power 5 days in August, and we are on a well So we had no water during that. So we just got a Generac whole house system installed, and you're not going to run that on gasoline. You need a gas line to run for a whole house. And I want to be prepared for a world that is we're already living in, where we cannot rely on DTE to serve our energy. Now, those are my points. And where I think, when we just say gas or electric, I guess they control both, right? Because there's a monopoly now. So I just, I don't know. It's to me, it's a much broader issue. There's a lot of things at play here. I really appreciate the discussion. So many people are so well informed and so thoughtful about this. And I really appreciate you bringing this to the table. So thank you for that.
Of course. I have a quick question for Travis or Cynthia. Do you know when council might consider this issue?
I do not have a date at the top of my mind.
Okay. But do you foresee this coming up on an agenda before? I mean, it usually goes through 2 reads, right? So if we were to postpone this piece of business to continue this discussion at our next meeting, that probably I just don't want this to hold up any decisions from city council expecting.
So there is not an introduced ordinance on our upcoming meeting on Monday, and yes, any ordinance requires at least 2 readings.
Great. Okay, thank you. Any other questions about this?
Hey, Zachariah, is there a chance that we can get I talked to Donnell earlier and I forgot the guy's name. Like somebody came, if somebody said the name, I would recognize it, but there's like a guy that does all the math and explains his work. And I'm wondering, maybe we could get that guy.
It's Ken Garber.
Is it Ken Garber? He who gave commentary?
Yeah, the guy who called in.
Oh, okay. I mean, maybe something like that can help those of us who are a little skeptical. I mean, we're research nerds in this town, right? So maybe that would be a helpful connection in the short term.
Yeah, I think so. I think we can maybe text about how to get that done. But I will just say I was in a pharmacology class at U of M, and the teacher made us read an article by Ken Garber. He's very meticulous and he does science research. I very much value his opinion. So yeah, I think I guess we'll talk about what the best way would be to do that. Okay, any other questions? Jeff.
Just in hearing what some of the folks have talked about, some of the solutions to these problems would be things like public utilities. Jordan, you had mentioned the power outage, right? I mean, that was huge for so many people. Would it be appropriate to include endorsement of something along those lines into something like this to alleviate some of those concerns?
Well, I know that I'm personally open to it. I'm open to talking about. I think later on the agenda we'll be talking about some statewide bills that were introduced to try to increase reliability of DTE. I think introduction of a public power utility on any level is going to take a lot of time. So I'm totally open to the discussion of that solution, or talking about maybe publicly supporting sustainable energy utility, et cetera, and some of these bills that are on the state level. Also, there's some county-wide statements and actions. But in all, I think supporting measures that will increase reliability would increase and sustainability of our fuel mix would definitely make this a more convincing proposal overall. So I think that's something we could maybe discuss at the next meeting. Okay, anything else?
I'm just flagging that I have to jump off to meet a deadline, but I like this discussion too. I'd love to hear more.
Thanks, Hannah.
That's
Good
all.
luck. Yeah. All right. In which case, I do have some proposed amendments, and I've written them out, including the ones suggested by you, Travis. I'm wondering. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I guess I'm hearing from a couple of folks that maybe they would like some additional time with this. And if that is the case, you may not actually have to go through the process of making formal amendments. You could come with a proposed substitute at the next meeting as well, if you wanted to do that, if you wanted to entertain a motion to postpone to the next meeting.
Yeah, that works, and that's exactly what I was going to propose. So perfect. Okay. Do we need to take a vote on postponing this? Okay. So I suppose I can motion to postpone it to our next meeting. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jamie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed to the postponement say nay. No. Nay. No. So excuse me. It's been a long night. I every time we go through ayes or yays or no's or nays, I think my mind just kind of checks out for a second. So excuse me. With that, it will be postponed to the next meeting in April. Okay, thank you everyone for the discussion. Oh, go ahead.
And I was just gonna say, this has been a great discussion, but I think I'm gonna have to drop off as well. But looking forward to continuing the discussion next month.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. And were you CC'd on that email about the meeting tomorrow morning?
Yes, yes, I'll be there at 10 a.m.
Okay, and no pressure if that's not convenient, but we'd love to have you.
Yeah.
See you, Patrick.
Take care.
Okay. All right. So with that, we can Lucy, go ahead.
Yeah, I have to hop off. I wanted to make a suggestion about the agenda, which would be to table the discussion of the remedies for apartment waitlist until next week because Gail isn't here.
Yeah.
And then I also have to leave, and I put some things together. So if people don't mind waiting until next month, I do have some substance to provide on that, and I'm sure Gail does too.
Yeah. Yes, I would definitely support that. And Kristen, I'll let you speak before we take any action.
Quorum.
Yes, so I believe that we quorum is half of the current members. We have 3 vacancies, so I believe that quorum is 5 members present, voting members present. And then we are at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is Lucy. Were you
Nick counts in the count though, right?
Nick's a voting member, yeah.
So you still have quorum.
Okay. Yes.
And then to vote on items after that, we would need majority of that quorum. So we would need 3 yeses.
Yeah. Okay.
By action.
Great. Now, before, would it be possible before we? I think we're going to have to end the meeting pretty soon here. Then, but I would like to vote on, or at least discuss quickly the resolution endorsing the carbon monoxide requirement, since that was asked of us by Councilmember Cornell, and if possible, before we lose quorum. Do you think that would be possible for all of you who have to leave?
I can stay until we do that, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. So I think that we should discuss that and have an early, I guess just end a bit early after that business item, considering that it seems like everyone needs to get going. So thumbs up on that plan, thumbs down if you think that's a bad plan. It's good. Okay, great. Yeah, Kristen.
Please hold public comment for this item since it's an action item. So we'll just in a moment briefly read it in case anyone is watching the YouTube stream or on their TV at home who would like to call in.
Of course. Sorry, I forgot to do that with the last item. I just didn't see anyone in the spectators list, so I just neglected it. Okay, so we can move on to 6-D, which is a discussion of, or excuse me, an action item, which is a resolution. Let me pull it up. Excuse me. It's very short. Here it is. Resolution in support of carbon monoxide ordinance revisions to Housing Code 105, which is the ordinance amendment that was brought forth by Councilmember Cornell. It's been slightly amended since the last time we saw it, but nothing really significant. I think that she did respond to some of the concerns that she heard about, specifically placement, I believe. Jeff.
Just as a point of curiosity, especially because it came up today, this is referencing the 105 housing code, and we had the people earlier had mentioned talking about moving over to the international code. Is this similar to what is in that code?
I believe so. Yeah, that's my understanding. That
might be a question best for Chris McFarland. So can I just have 30 seconds?
Of course.
So the changes were in large part because of the feedback that you folks provided us. So thanks. Like the landlords and some of the tenant reps wanted clarity as to where they should go. And we initially had a version that incorporated by reference various sections of either the fire code or the building code. But here we just went to those and directly embedded into the ordinance where they go. We tell you where they go. So there's more clarity now rather than the reference. Also, there was discussion about the batteries and who should supply the batteries and the conditions. So that's why these changes came about, to give it some clarity.
Yeah, thank you, John. And I will, I have to quickly find, I can show you all the amended version. I think this is it. Oh, geez. This is the amended version of the ordinance amendment. It's the most updated ordinance amendment for this. So it does talk about the batteries. There's just really some slight changes, I think, to increase clarity. And this is introduced, it's on the agenda for the city council meeting for first reading later this month on the 20th, is that right?
Upcoming Monday. And 1B is the big change.
Yeah.
Says where they should go.
Yeah, I'd also be happy to share the old version if you all would like that. Just to see what changed, but I don't think that's necessary. Okay. So I will make a motion to open up discussion on this. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Don. Okay, so would anyone like to make any comments, questions about the resolution? I'll show it once again. Very short, just mentions part of our mission as a commission. Talks about how Councilmember Cornell came to present. There are some minor changes. It's on this next meeting's agenda for city council. This is a really serious public health concern, which is why we're talking about it, since public health is in our mission. And we think it's a good idea that to make this a requirement. Any questions, concerns, comments? Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I apologize for introducing two pieces of business at the last minute. I wasn't expecting to introduce this until I heard from Councilmember Cornell last night. But without further ado, I'd like to move to vote on this.
Second.
So, yeah, do we need a second to move into voting? Yeah, Kristen.
So has someone moved that you pass the I move that we adopt the resolution put forward and seconded? Has that occurred?
Yes, that happened. Yeah.
Oh, that did
Okay.
happen.
You and Don did that. Yeah.
So, okay, so motioning to introduce the, is it to introduce it? Opens up?
It's already been moved and supported. If discussion is done, you can take a vote.
I see.
Let's quickly hold public hearing since we said, or public comment since we said we would, just be really quick.
Excuse me.
If there is anyone watching who would like to call in, you can call 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 935-8080-1941, or you can go to the Zoom link a2gov.org/renters commission meeting. And then we'll give that just like 30 seconds, just in case anyone's calling in. You can discuss during this time if you need to.
One thing I just want to point out about this is that the old version did reference the International Fire Code. I know there were some concerns about that. The new version does not. Yeah.
With respect to carbon monoxide, we still do for smoke detectors.
Gotcha.
At
Yeah,
the recommendation of the fire marshal.
That's right, yeah.
All set with public comment. No, no attendees have indicated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move into voting. All those in favor of adopting this resolution and recommending to City Council that they pass this ordinance amendment, say aye.
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 All those opposed to adoption of the resolution, say no. Okay, with that, this resolution is adopted and we will make the recommendation to City Council. Thank you, everyone. I can feel that people are
Bye,
getting
everyone. I'm so sorry.
tired. Yeah, bye, Lucy. Okay. Let me just look back. Excuse me. Open up my notes here. Well, I can feel that we're all getting kind of tired, so I'm wondering if we should just move it into adjournment. I guess, do we have to vote first on tabling our items or postponing them to the next meeting? Kristen?
We did just have a caller join, which doesn't answer your question, but if you would like to they likely called in because they were listening or watching. If you'd like to open public comment briefly for 3 minutes for this caller. Before we do that, I think that you would need to move to postpone the items to a future meeting, but I would ask Reiser or Councilmember Radina if you don't think that's true.
I think we can just go ahead and do that quickly and then adjourn just to cover our bases. Sound good? Okay.
Caller ending in 134. Oh God. Caller ending in 134. You can address the Renters Commission for up to 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you. This is Ken Garber again. I wanted to make general public comment at the end of the meeting. I don't know if this is the correct time.
I think that's fine.
Yeah, it's fine to go now. Otherwise, it would be in about 1 minute. So you can go ahead and use this time.
That's okay. I can wait.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
So, excuse me, I'll motion to postpone the remainder of our business to our next meeting so that we can adjourn early. Well, it's not early, but we can adjourn and then discuss these other points of business. I know we all have things to do and beds to
So
sleep.
moved.
Yes. Thank you, Jeff. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Jamie. Second by Jamie. All those in favor of postponing the remainder of our business, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say no. Okay, with that, we postpone the remainder of our business. And we can open up public comment.
All right, so anyone watching can call 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099 and enter the meeting ID 935-8080-1941, or you can join the Zoom link, and that is a2gov.org/Renters Commission meeting. Anyone who would like to address the Renters Commission can press *9 to raise your hand if you're calling, or you can use the raise hand feature from the Zoom meeting. So if there is anyone watching or listening, you can raise your hand now. You can address the Renters Commission for up to 3 minutes. Caller ending in 134, you will have 3 minutes to address the Renters Commission.
Thank you, Kristen. This is Ken Garber again. Yeah, I actually want to point out that I am not an expert on any of this stuff. I'm just a person who respects data over opinion. And I think that's probably what Planning Commissioner Donnell Weiss was communicating to the one Planning Commissioner who mentioned that. So I'm flattered, but really, I'm just a layperson who's somewhat anal about this material. Anyway, a few comments. Great discussion tonight. Commissioner Elsa's statement that everyone knows that utility costs for electric are 30% higher than for gas needs data verification, and I believe it is incorrect, at least at current gas prices. Robertson Brothers, the developer doing the big Pontiac Trail project, made that exact 30% claim, but their consultant used DTE's October 21 gas rate of 67 cents per therm, rather than the current rate of 90 cents per therm, which is 33% higher. Take that into consideration, and the lower expense of heat pump air conditioning I mentioned earlier, plus the very tight building envelopes required by the coming state energy code, and we're talking a negligible difference, if any. I'm not opposed to tenant utility rebates from the city, but the whole premise is wrong. Regarding upfront costs, remember that heat pumps double as air conditioners. So again, essentially negligible upfront difference in cost, especially in the context of overall new construction. Regarding the concern about coping with power outages without gas, it's legitimate given recent circumstances, but remember that these new buildings will hold their heat much better than most current buildings. Local builder Doug Selby has spoken at Planning Commission about several of his high efficiency homes that he's built. And as I remember that he said that during a previous multi-day winter outage, they never went below 61 degrees. And new projects like the proposed 79 apartment building on North Maple are including battery storage and 90 kilowatts of solar panels. You don't need much battery storage to run space heaters for long enough to get you through even an extended outage. Regarding Commissioner Droppelman's comment that heat pumps, even geothermal, require electric resistance backup for very cold periods, that's only true if you have a ducted system, which is typically a retrofit, not if you have a non-ducted system such as a mini split or VRF system. The current air source heat pump systems do not need electric resistance backup at all. Finally, the notion that all electric is more expensive than will raise rents just by themselves requires evidence. I find that implausible. The Maple Road development I just mentioned will include 15% of all units. They have 60% AMI. So it's including affordable housing, As I mentioned, they have substantial rooftop solar, battery storage, all
30
electric.
seconds.
And they're including affordable housing. I mean, this developer obviously crunched the numbers and they came out fine. So all these concerns are legitimate. I don't want to poo-poo them, but I do think we have to be guided by data rather than unfounded assumptions. And I'm happy to help in that regard to the extent I can. So thank you, Commission, for discussing this and taking it into consideration. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. So I think we're going to have to do some work before the next meeting. I'm more than happy to do some of the research, and if anyone's interested in in doing some fact finding, let's send me an email and we'll work on it together. I'd love that. I really appreciate the discussion on that issue, though. Okay, so that moves us to adjournment. So is there a motion to adjourn from anybody?
So moved.
Okay, I saw Nick first. Seconded by Jeff. Thank you very much. All those in favor of adjourning say aye.
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 That's an interesting way to, yeah. Thank you, Jordan. All those opposed say no. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Sorry that this meeting went on kind of long. There was a lot of good discussion, though. I was very happy with everything I learned and all of your points. I thought a lot of really solid concerns and questions were brought up. See you next month.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Not everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Good night.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Thank you, John. See ya. Bye.